I actually have automated all the start and stop stuff, but I need to de-automate some of it because I still need to go out and browser blank every once in a while to show you stuff that's going on and such. Just so you guys know, we will get going here officially. I mean, look at this. There's like big me. Oh my gosh, that's so scary. All right, so let's go back here. I need to go back to the screen only. All these wonderful OBS things that I have stopped using because I thought I needed to automate it, and frankly, I needed to do that a little bit more. Yes, it is very tunnelish. The audio isn't right. What does that mean? It's tunnel-ish. It's tunnelish. It's tunnelish. Which part is tunnelish? How about now? I wonder if they changed that at all. I mean, how's this? Is this better or is this worse? There's nothing that's really changed there. How about now? Is it as radio quality sounding? You know, I don't know why that is. I really don't. I don't know. OBS has been kind of weird lately. But we might just have to deal with that for today. I mean, that's all I can say about that. Let's see here. I mean, I could connect my sound equipment. I wonder if that would do a thing. It might be. I wonder if that gets some. I wonder if that board gets overheated every once in a while. Has a problem with that. But yeah, I'll have to go through and mess with all that another day. As long as the audio is enough to get us through the boost. This is why I'm rotating these things. I mean, I haven't changed anything. What is the topic today? Well, that would be a question for you to go answer for yourself by looking at the schedule, which is, if you go to the schedule, link you to week 02, the README on here. And so there you go. That's what we should have. Linux on bare metal. It's actually a big topic. I don't want to get into it just yet. But this is day 4, in case you're wondering. Sorry for the sound quality if it's different than it was last time. I can't imagine why, other than that this system got rebooted. And I wonder if some of the sound settings were changed as a result. That could very well be. Microphone from the Brio? Holy cow. Well, there's your reason right there. Here you go. Watch this. It might hurt your ears. How about now? It should be a lot better now. Sound better now? Yeah. That is a casualty from the reboot. I need to make sure to write back about that. So note to self, reset to digital input on reboot, because it tries to get that stupid Brio mic, which sucks. Sultry voice of artificial. Oh god. I don't even know what to do with that. There's like no punchline. We have 30 seconds left. That's not quite enough time to get coffee, so I will wait till the next break. So yeah, that's an important little note here. I gotta make sure of that, because I'd hate to make a whole 3-hour stream and with Brio audio. Oh my god. Thank you, Zeros, for letting me know. Now I know why Professor Messer spends like 15 minutes. All right, countdown. We're T-minus 10 minutes. Is everything ready? Have you guys ever seen Professor Messer getting ready to do his streams on YouTube? He has like an entire system of like, okay, radio check. Okay, this is like got like so much stuff.
I think he enjoys like running his command center as much as he loves doing the teaching. And he's a big train fan, so he's already a gearhead. He's a gearhead. Lots of love to you, Professor Messer, even though I hate CompTIA and actively suggest that people don't get them. So I guess I'm countering your influence in the universe a tiny little bit. I think the knowledge is good. 5 screens and a tablets, check. What's bad on CompTIA? You know what? That is a great question for my new stupid page. Okay, and I'm not calling you stupid, Standardless. Okay, I just added a stupid page today. Because I'm so tired of answering these stupid questions. They're not stupid questions. They're questions from uninformed people that I get all the time that are starting to trigger me. So, wait.
Just call that an FAQ.
What I called it an FA. I have an FAQ that's all nice and polite. Hey, are you making coffee? I was just wondering. If you're not, I'll start the water. That's RWX wife. There are so many reasons not to do anything with CompTIA. We are not talking about that today. I'm not going to allow myself to be pulled into the certification conversation today. We actually talked about it yesterday. You can go back and watch the VOD, or you can watch the YouTube video from yesterday if you want to know. But I need to add that. I need to add that to my stupid advice page. The problem is that I don't feel as strongly about getting a CompTIA certificate as I do about, say, using Z Shell or Control L to clear your screen. I mean, those things are just blatantly stupid advice that people tell people, but because they don't know. But again, stupid advice, not stupid people, right? Different. But CompTIA is more of a personal disagreement with the company, organization, multiple guests format for proving your skills. Obviously, the whole industry depends on a big part of this CompTIA stuff, which I think is a massive industry fail. But that's all there is out there that some people claim. I don't think that's true. We had some people talk about that yesterday on the stream about certification. Should I certify? Should I not? That's like for a whole stream by itself, and I don't have time for that. We got lots to cover today. But if you want to really know about certification, go watch my video called Why Certify, and it goes through the pros and cons if you should do it and how and when. It doesn't talk about CompTIA at all. It does recommend, though, that you pick a certificate that's actually has you do stuff instead of fill in the right blank. Catting into pipes is wrong. Well, so there's a bunch of stuff there that people don't know. That's why I'm starting to make a thing about it. It's like I have to correct these things so much. And I really want to be sure that everything on this page is pretty solidly an objective correction. This is not opinion stuff. It's just wrong to cat into a pipe or to cat into a while loop because it will screw up your variables. So, but people don't know that, so they continue to do it. So I have to kind of make that. There's one reason that I don't like CompTIA. They have proven that their ethos is money over education over and over again. And they are in bed with the government to make sure that they get all that sweet certification money. And if they had their way, they would legally force anyone in IT to get one of their certificates. Not a company that I want to have anything to do with. I used to. I got books all over here to help you do A+ certification, all this stuff. And not anymore. I just refuse. Okay, so enough of that. VimWiki, love it. VimWiki is a thing. It's not my favorite. I'm not using VimWiki, no. I'm using Markdown and VI. Who would have thought that you could make an amazing site with nothing more than Markdown and VI? But save that conversation for another day. That conversation is going to happen. Let's look back at our schedule just so we can keep ourselves on track, because I needed my coffee time today. So we've got a couple of people in the Discord mention how excited they are, and they want me to jump right ahead and show how I'm doing the website. How am I building rwx.gg, which is our site from, I was trying to show it to you, but I guess not. And the answer is later. I'm going to show you that later. So we're going to cover all of that on week was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, week 6, and the ones are here for a reason. So I actually broke some links too, because I've been fixing things. One of the most important ones was basic mark. And so if you go to basic mark, you'll get the overview of the markdown that I use, and that really you should consider being the only markdown you use. That's a strong opinion. It's not worthy of the stupid advice page for using something else. There's lots of other people who use other things for decent reasons, but I believe it's really the most compelling way to maintain knowledge source. I'm going to make that case ad nauseum on that. So let's get back to on track. I've already burned 6 minutes of today's hardware day, and can I just, as we go into this day, I struggle. I only got this thing done this morning because last night I was really struggling with how to present this on a stream. This is one of the things, this topics that very solidly benefits from being in person. And just to let you know, I used to have the people I mentor professionally who come here, they would bring in all of their old hardware. In fact, my downstairs, the place where I used to have a lab and everything, was full of old hardware. I mean, it was awesome. It had like, some grandma's computer over here and like this old dead laptop that nobody thinks can run anything but Windows 8 and, 98. And it's all of this hardware that everybody had found, and it was just everywhere. It was kind of messy. My wife hated it, but it was like this, this mad laboratory of Linux systems and hardware. Let's see if we can put Linux on this. And it was super fun. I mean, I gotta tell you, I am kind of bummed by that. This is the one COVID thing that I will tell you that does bum me out. And it also, the other thing that bums me out about it is that we also had, back when I had a lab, this is before I moved into a home where I just do everything from my front room that's been converted to a lab. And now it's getting converted back to a front room because of COVID. So we had this lab and we had all these people coming by on a Saturday and they were all tinkering and there was the smell of solder fumes. I mean, it was just awesome. And I got to tell you, the energy in a learning lab like that is just so palpable. I really encourage you guys, if you can find an opportunity to find like a maker space. Yeah, it has been a great learning opportunity. No kidding. It really has. So if you can find, like, when we go back to normal life, which might be, who knows, it might be a year away. But make yourself a lab. And if you can't do that, make your own lab. So I used to, when I was when I was Nike's webmaster and I was teaching myself Linux and building my own systems, and built my first computer in 97, 6 or something, 97 or 8. Yeah, they forgot they should have creative hobbies, and now they're suddenly they're home. So my garage was like filled with all kinds of different projects, and I know that sounds really cliche, but one of the projects was building my first computer. And thank God I lived in Portland. I lived next to a Fry's Electronics. Does anybody know about Fry's Electronics? Do you know about this? It's actually featured in Mr. Robot, which is the one in Arizona. There's not very many of them. This is an American thing. This is like basically an entire superstore of electronics. And I mean superstore. They are massive. They're like, they make, like Costco. It's like Costco for electronics. And so you could go there and make anything you wanted to. And we would get all the pieces. And I had a friend who was actually A+ CompTIA certified, desktop guy, and he gave me the confidence to start to try to make my own computer. And that's part of the topic today. So this is probably the only day in the whole boost where we're going to talk about building computers and finding computers and re-energizing computers with new Linux life. That's what today is for. And there's not a lot of things I can show you. So it's going to be a lot of conversation, a lot of like experience sharing from other people in the chat and from myself, because this is the kind of thing that you really have to have hands-on experience with. And so what is the minimum you can get away with? Okay. So, first of all, it's important that you know that Linux runs on anything. And I mean practically anything. I have not found anything that Linux doesn't run on. The hardest thing I've ever tried to get Linux on that we gave up was a Chromebook. It was it was like probably a 6-year-old Chromebook from today. And these things actually have a screw in the motherboard you have to remove before it will even allow you to do anything to change the operating system on it. And thank God, Chromebook changed that 2 years ago to great fanfare. They said, you know what? It's time for us to change and get with the times and allow people to put Linux on their Chromebooks if they want to. Chromebooks will run Linux pretty well. In fact, they're running Linux. Android operating system is Linux. We saw that on, I think, day 1 this week in our chart. And so, it will run it. It's just a matter of, how happy the manufacturer is for you to run on there. So this today is all about finding your hardware, and picking hardware or making hardware. But I do want to go into this with one word of caution. Don't do this first. All right. So people will go advance that advice and they'll try it and do it first. That's fine. The last line here, be sure you can break it. Okay. And the reason I'm suggesting that you don't do the hardware thing first is because it might be more educational for you to break, virtual machines and Docker containers first. And that's why we did virtualization yesterday and containerization. So I strongly stand by that advice that it's better for you to break a virtual machine than a real machine, because you can snap it back. And we had some people yesterday saying that they wish that they had done that first because they had to redo their hardware so many times. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you have time, but it's just, I think it's more educational. Another thing you can do is you can sample all the different operating systems. So you'll know when I started streaming some time ago, I was big into Mint. No, you must use Mint. And I still stand by that recommendation that most beginners should use a beginner's version of Linux, and that has changed for me to Pop! OS after evaluating it, as you saw yesterday. But, which, by the way, sorry for the exit yesterday. Did you guys remember that? Like, all of a sudden, I hit the right keystrokes to, kill my TTY. I had to reboot. I lost my uptime. I was so bummed. I actually spent 30 minutes trying to connect remotely. I did. I connected remotely and was Init running and all this stuff and changing everything, and I still could not get that Pop! OS virtual machine to go away and give me back my screen, not even with an X restart remote. It was crazy. So that's what happened yesterday. I just decided to not come back because the session had already ended. Yeah, I popped myself big time. But we were doing our upgrade, and we're going to talk about that again today. So pick up old hardware that Linux will work on, and at the electronic recycling places people dump. And I want to tell you, I dump stuff all the time to their places too. If you can go there, you will not. I mean, the worst one ever. I don't know if I tell the story. We had somebody give me his old system. He's like, yeah, I got an old one. I don't use it anymore. And we got it, and that thing, the cat lived in it. And he goes, dude, you have to understand. He kept trying to tell me. He's like, you guys, he goes, you have to understand. I had a cat living in this thing. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll try it. So I kid you not, I will never forget that Linux build. I built it into a server, but it had cat hair all over the motherboard. It smelled so bad. And I had to figure this thing out. And I was like, okay, fine. Well, what things work? And that was actually when I bought, you don't need these anymore, but I bought what's called a postcard. You guys know about these things? So it's a piece of hardware that goes in your PCI slot, and it has a little digital LED on it, and it tells you what's going on with the motherboard. And it was at that time that I learned all about interrupts, IRQs, all kinds of stuff like that. So if you want to get into the hardware side of things and understand hardware, how the hardware works, the best way you can do that, and this goes along with your Linux learning, is to find an old piece of crap PC, and Linux will run fine on that. Maybe not Pop! OS, but there are so many Linux variations. That's what I was getting at with the Mint thing, that you can. But DD is not the best. Do not make advice like that. This is beginners. So the one thing, I'm not going to ban you, but I want to tell you something. Because you think you're so smart, and you're smarter than everybody else because you know DD, this is not the place to exhibit your ego and do a flex. This is a beginner boost, okay? So our new friend Val Dian is trying to tell you to use the most dangerous command in all of Unix to create your ISOs, and that is officially not my recommendation to you. We're using Balena Etcher for a very specific purpose, and we're going to get to that, and I'm going to talk to you about why that is. But let's finish up on the hardware thing. Okay, so when you're talking about hardware, make sure you get something you can break, because somebody might recommend you use DD and you might end up trashing your hard drive and need to know how to recover from that. Okay, so, and also make sure that you have another system that you can use. Okay, so that's stable. So like, let's say you have Windows or you have Mac or you have an anything, another Linux machine. You're going to need another system to do stuff on, to like check it out and to like go download software and all that stuff, and it needs to be stable. Okay, all right, so let's jump ahead. I don't know how far we're going to get in today's schedule because it's mostly going to be talk, but so let's actually move into the topic about how to make a USB drive. Okay, so let's see. Does anybody have any, before we leave the hardware topic? I mean, that was a very short summary of hardware. Maybe a few people could ask questions about what the minimum hardware is and what kind of operating system goes with that hardware. I almost feel like I think we did start a hardware chat in the Discord, but if you are, in the Discord and you have a hardware recommendation for a given operating system or vice versa, please, we'd welcome your opinions on that. Let's see, I haven't, of course, if Arch will run on all of the low-end stuff because it's so tiny, but I don't know if you want that as a beginner. I have a netbook Athlon 1.2 with 2 gigs of RAM, 230 gigabyte hard drive. It's good as crap hardware to run Linux. I think so. I think it is. I think that, but that's not, you wouldn't want to run like a really heavy duty window manager. So for that kind of thing, I might recommend something like Lubuntu, or there's lower versions of Mint. The real question is whether it's 32-bit. Yeah, it is very hard to find 32-bit. In fact, the entire Mint project dropped 32-bit support. And so they got in big trouble. Everybody came after them for that. So they kept 64-bit. It's actually pretty hard for you to find hardware that's not 64-bit, even if it's 20 years old at this point. So if you can, I would stick with 64-bit if you can find one. But I want to punch that part again. Keep looking around. You'd be surprised where you find stuff. I've had people say, no, I don't have a computer. And I said, can you just kind of go look? And as soon as they actually asked their mom, XFCE is the one I was going to recommend. Mint with XFCE is my current recommendation for old hardware because it has a very lightweight window manager and it can do all that other stuff. All right, so if you are going to be doing, if you're going to be doing really lightweight stuff on a really old machine, we actually ran XFCE on a Windows 98 system. He brought it in and we booted it up, and sure enough, it had what is that, Oregon Trail on there still. I mean, it was really fun. And these are people that said they didn't have a computer, and then they came back and asked around to their mom and dad and people, and they're like, oh yeah, we got like 10 up in the stair. You know why? People don't throw away hardware. For some reason, they don't throw it away because it's got stuff on the disk that they think they're going to use someday. They never do, or else they did their taxes on there and they're afraid of giving it to Goodwill because they can't get the hard drive out and they're afraid someone's going to steal their data. And so it's amazing how many computers are just sitting around in people's houses. In fact, so much so that if you want to, I stopped short of doing this. Now with COVID, I can't. But you can actually organize, I don't know what you would even call it, but like an event where you go collect people's hardware. I actually think you should get an affidavit for this if you do it. If you were to get a legal affidavit to say, hey, I am with a group and we are collecting old hardware, we're putting Linux on it, and we are giving that hardware to people who don't have computers. Mint 20 KDE, I don't know, it might be. So my point is, if somebody out there wants to consider, I know with COVID it's a thing harder, but I really think that there is an untapped potential here to harvest old computers and to, with an affidavit, say we guarantee that we will clean your disks off. and put Linux on those disks and give those computers to those in need around here. And there's a lot in my area who just don't have computers at all. And then you can, at Linux, it's amazing. You put Pop! OS or even LXFC, people can understand how to use that, even though they can't play their favorite Windows games or something. But it gives them a computer, and then they can do something with it where they don't have one. And believe me, there's like, I can't even remember the percentage, but it's more than you would think of people who just don't have computers at all. Peppermint OS 32-bit is a good distro. Okay. All right. So let's switch into flashing for the next half hour. And we're going to go ahead and talk about that. And I'm going to defend my takedown of Mr. Do Everything with DD because, you know what? I agree. Once you get to the certain level, you can do things with DD. But let me tell you, just so, since you brought it up, I want to bring up why you don't want to do this with DD. And you're going to read on tons of Ubuntu sites and all kinds of advice about how to flash a USB stick using DD. And not a single one of those tutorials is going to tell you how to run a checksum validation on the thing. None of them. They never do. They always say, "Oh yeah, go do this." They also, you know what they also don't do? They don't warn you that if you turn the amount of data. So let me just back up. So DD is a tool for disk duplication, or it's been called lots of things. Let me go show you. Man, DD, and it is a stinking awesome application. It's super cool. What it does is it copies a file or device, which is a file in Unix and Linux, by bits. It copies the exact bits to another thing, and it is cool, but it is not the tool for this job. Here's why I don't think it's the tool for this job. It is so totally dangerous. I wrote a script actually that automatically imaged ISO images and just destroy. Yeah, and if you do it wrong and you point it at the wrong thing, even for 2 seconds, it will blow away your disk drive without any warning. And I have destroyed more disk drives than I care to admit using DD because I thought I was pointing it at the wrong thing. So, and the other thing too is that it's not even good at what people are using it for. So one of the things, all it does is copy bit for bit from one file, inode to another one. That means if it's from one device to another one, it's really great for making mirror images of disks. It's super good for that. You know what else it's really good for doing? It's good for like embedding like encrypted packages inside of multimedia. So I've hidden an entire, encrypted password file inside of some multimedia that shall not be named, and it's out there, and there's no way they could even tell the difference unless they really knew what they were looking for. So it is an excellent tool. It's a good tool for pen testing and hacking and manipulating files at the bit level. Normally, in fact, I don't even think there's many other commands that do that from the command line. Most of the time, you'd have to write a tool to do that kind of thing. Yeah, and it takes you 4 times to triple and quad verify the syntax and path correct. So, and by the way, even if you successfully, so there's 2 things you have to really watch out for DD, and this is, I'm going to actually now add this as a thing. I'm going to say, I'm going to make a thing called Dangers of DD. The Disk Destroyer. Disk Destroyer. Okay. Anyway, so there's two reasons that you should not use this tool for this job. The first one is how the byte size. You see how it says byte size equals bytes? When you use this tool, you have to tell it how many bytes to write at a time. And if you get the number wrong, a lot of people don't know this. I can't believe how many people haven't been burned by this. When you get the number wrong, let's say you say, well, I want it to write faster, so I'm going to make it 1 gigabyte. What happens? Anybody know? What happens when you turn your byte size all the way up because you want it to copy faster? Does anybody actually know what happens? I'm just curious because there's a lot of people on the stream and we have senior people. I'm just curious if they know what happens when you do that. Nope. You don't run out of space on the drive. Nope. Okay, so what happens is DD is stupid. Okay, it doesn't crash, it doesn't memory fail. It can't keep up. Okay, so when you turn it clears the hard drive to all zeros. Nope, none of those things. So what it does, when you turn this byte size up higher than your disk is able to write, and people do it, they used to do it all the time, Yeah, 0% accuracy. So what? That's closer to the right answer than any of the others so far. Yeah. Okay. It buffers. Yeah. Right. It can potentially skip bits, but it used to actually be more vulnerable to that. But I actually think it has more to do with the buffering than anything. So you might think you can like turn DD up and say, hey, I want to do 2 gigabytes a second, and you can do that, and it'll finish really fast. But it's actually hasn't written it because it can't. The disk drive can't keep up. So if you're lucky, your disk drive is able to buffer that much and then write it. But if it can't buffer that much and you set the number above it, you lose data. And then the second problem comes to play with DD, and it has no checksum validation. So what happens is you don't even know if your disk can keep up because it might be doing something else. And then you should always sync after DD. How many people knew that? I mean, honestly, how many people know even what sync is? So my point is, people say, yeah, use DD, but they don't even know why they should use sync. They don't know what the byte sizes are, and they don't know how to confirm their checksum rights after they're done. They have no way to validate the quality of their copy. And what are you doing? You're making a USB stick from which you're going to install your base operating system. If there has ever been a case for checksumming and validating your ISOs, this is it. So this is the time to put DD aside and swallow your ego and use a tool that has checksum validation, that's guaranteed to do the sync by itself, and that is going to be something that works everywhere. So this is why, and again, I love DD for what it's necessary for use, but I think it has no business in a beginner boost talking about how to create a USB stick. And I'm really glad he brought it up, because lots of people recommend it and they don't know the danger, and they go, I cannot tell you how many times I've had beginners say, using DD, I don't know what's going on, it's not working. So this is also the reason that I no longer recommend things like Rufus, and I'm going to put this in here. Why not Rufus or others? There are other tools out there to do disk ISO creation, thumb drive flashing, and some of them suck. And Rufus is one of them. It used to be the standard recommendation on Windows. I cannot tell you how much better Balena Etcher is. So this is what I want you to do. I don't believe I can even do this live here on my current system. But what I would encourage you to do as homework today is to download Balena Etcher. I think I can get, a lot of people have used Rufus successfully. I'm not saying it doesn't work every time. I'm saying that Rufus, first of all, Rufus doesn't run on everything. I can't run Rufus on my Mac as far as I know. And I can't run Rufus on my Linux machine as far as I know. And, before, I got to tell you, Etcher for the win. I was really, really, really skeptical when I saw this tool. I thought, because let's be honest, you're putting a tool, Balena Etcher, here it is. You are putting a tool on your system that is going to be responsible for a very important thing. And I was like, oh, what is this? Is this more adware? Is this going to destroy my system? And people have problem with Rufus all the time because it gets the boot sex drives wrong. And I'm just going to say Rufus constantly gets the boot sectors wrong on the images, and I have been burned by that more times than I care to count. I have never once been burned by Balena Etcher, and I've been using it for 2 years now. And the other thing too, now the big downside of Balena Etcher, I will just say, is that Balena Etcher is Electron. So that's the dirty secret. The reason it's so beautiful is because it's Electron. Okay, so that's not what people like to hear, but it is. I know. You took Etcher, yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and download it. There's my Balena Etcher. Looks like I already have one. And you know what else I hate about Etcher? It's Snap. It's actually, you can get it in different forms, but there's a lot of things about Etcher I don't like, but they made sacrifices in order to make it so it would run on everything, and it does. Yeah, but bang, bang, done with Etcher. I mean, it's so easy, but it does have these disadvantages. So let me go see here. Oops, wrong one. What am I doing? Don't even know what I'm doing. I turned my, it's because I rebooted. All right, so let's do this. Let me show you, first of all, see if I have my etcher here. I need to turn my opacity back up. All right, so let's see here. We're going to go into downloads where I've downloaded it. I like gparted. No. We've already just talked about that, Vehemence. Please don't. Go back and watch what I just ranted about for the last half hour. Guys, when people tell you to use gparted and DD, they are not talking to beginners. The end. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Not until you know what you're doing. And you know, it's usually something an Arch user will tell you. By the way, I use Arch. They're not considering your position of where you are right now. You know, suggesting disk partitioning to a beginner is just irresponsible. I am so triggered by that. You know, it is totally something you have to learn eventually, but don't tell a beginner to do it on their first try. Especially, I mean, we had to do it, people. I'm with you. Iron's there. I had to do it with you all those years ago. You don't need it anymore. Okay. So, all right. Okay, so here we go. We did Docker containers yesterday. We talked all about that, so I'm not going to talk about that again. Yeah, keep it simple. All right. Use Arch. No, I don't. I use Arch. I use Arch in a VM to do amazing, fun things with, you know, that I'm trying to do with Capture the Flag when I have time. But I use Mint and Pop! OS for my really stable systems. And I don't have any shame doing that. Mint is rock solid. I mean, it is rock solid. And so far, Pop! OS has been even better than Mint in my tests. So I want a rock solid, easy to use, fun OS when I stream. Am I going to stream from an Arch system? Probably could do it. Why would I want to spend the time? We're not going to distro argue right now. But that, I think it's the right tool for the job. And that's, in fact, the next CTF prep distro that I'm going to do is going to be a Docker container. I'm going to do an Arch Docker container instead of I use Cinnamon because I have the horsepower for it. A lot of people love Mate. I think Zeros is a Mate fan. Mate is beautiful too. At that level, it's more of just of a personal preference for your window manager. I don't think window managers you can't go wrong with any of those choices. Yeah. All right. So for beginner, we're talking about beginners on their hardware, unless it's like hardware that's really old, and then maybe ask some people in the chat what they might want to use. But here's the problem with Balena etcher. So I think, let me see, unzip Balena etcher electron. I know it's hard, but it's like, it's an app image. You guys know about app images? Do you know what these things are? App images are these new things that are really easy to run. No need to install them. Again, the guys at Balena, or the guys and gals at Balena, really considered everything. And so all you have to do is schmod the thing. You just schmod plus X, or U plus X if you want. Balena etcher.appimage. You know what? It might be. I don't even know what an app image is. I probably should know. But now once you change it like this, in fact, there's fresh coffee. Oh, okay. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Artivic's wife. Thank you very much. So here we go. So let's move this thing. So I'm going to move my Balena etcher and into, I don't know, maybe a bin directory or someplace. Actually, I can just run it from right here. Let's just run it from right here. You're the best. I'm trying to get done so I can come down and drink it with you. So here we go. We're going to do /Balena etcher app image, and it's now going to run this. And, you know, hardcore Linux people who grew up, you know, with no stinking graphics like me. I mean, I don't think anybody has to tell anybody on the stream what I think of graphics user interfaces. But when you're talking about a beginner, I mean, this is seriously this easy. And so you click on select an image. Hey, look, there's Pop! OS. You know what? I'm going to make one right now. I think I might even have an OS installed. Do I have a thumb drive down there? Just give me 1 second. Oh my gosh. Oh, I can't blow away my Windows 10. My Windows 10. Hey, whatever. So, I'm not going to do it, but you select target. So basically, honestly, you plug in your USB stick Yes, it supports IMG. It does support IMG and ISOs. It'll find whatever, and it just does the right thing. I mean, it's extremely intelligent. It's the most intelligent flash tool I've ever seen. And then you click on select target, and then you click flash. And then, and when it does the flash, this is the important thing. It gives you a visual. It gives you a visual. Gives you a visual representation. Me too, Valjan. By the way, so it gives you a visual representation of how everything is going, and it gives you this big, long, beautiful checksum validation at the end, and it gives you this nice, gold stamp at the end, and then it asks you, do you want to do another one? So like, this is really great, because if you're working in I have like a whole candy jar of USB sticks downstairs, and if I wanted to make 10 Pop OS ones, I could just put another one in and hit image, put another one in, hit image, put another one in and hit image, and it's fast. I gotta tell you, I don't know how they made it so fast. So far, the biggest drawback of Balena is that it's an app image and it runs Electron. And it even unmounts it for you, so you can pull out the thing. I do not know of any other limitation. I have never hit one. You know what I thought was going to be a limitation? I'll tell you right now. I thought when I went out to the company site, I was going to see some sort of like, crappy organization that I would never want to support in any way. Turns out, no. When you study Balena as a company, you start to think, I want to work for this company. I mean, this company is on the cutting edge of IoT. They are an embedded systems. They are like, the reason they made this is because they have to flash so much stuff because they're dealing with so many things. So I was like, when you research the company, instead of like finding a reason to hate the company, not to mention, look, they released Balena Etcher on GitHub finally. I don't think that was released. Oh, they have Etcher Pro now. Interesting. They didn't have that before. Did they have that before? I don't remember that before. They released the whole thing as public, open source. This is new information. Electron is it's basically Node over WebSockets and Chromium mixed into one bundle. You use it every time you use Discord or Slack, or a lot of other things. This is cool. This means they released Balena as open source and they have a pro version. That's very cool. And you know what? It didn't have any of the advertising in it, I noticed. Did you guys notice that? Last time when I used this, it had advertising in it for the Balena company. And so now we can go to Balena, a black and orange logo. It used to have a black, I think it might have. This might just actually, I think this might be just my colors, Val. So, Valdian. So yeah, and well, when it very first came out, it might have had issues, but I must have came to it after that. Because I never saw any of that. But so Balena's got a lot of things. They have container cloud stuff. They just have a lot of stuff. And I gotta tell you, the more I study the company, I'm like, I like this company a lot. I mean, people hate on Electron for being so much bullet for some apps. You know what? They do, but we've talked about that. I actually have lots of videos on that. Why Electron? What's wrong with Electron? And I'm not going to go into the detail there. Look at that. They have a Balena OS to run Docker containers on embedded devices. I mean, I'm seriously, I'm like wanting to look at these things, not to mention wanting to maybe work for a company like this someday. I mean, these guys are right in the sweet spot of IT right now. They are looking, spread Linux love at warp speed, up to 160 ports. Are you kidding me? So, I mean, they just know what's up. This is a company that knows what's up. It's got it's got they got forums. They got cool base images. They're like all over in the Docker stuff. And they're doing single board computers. I don't think I ever saw. They have a board. Man, now I'm really geeking out. They have their own single board computer. Oh my gosh, when did this get announced? Coffee's getting cold. I know I can't take a break until I have to go for another 15 minutes. Actually, we have a thing on the coffee. So maybe I could take an early break, but I have to keep to my times. This is awesome. So, is this, you know what? No, I have nothing to do with them. I have nothing to do with them. I am serious. You need to know this about me. I don't care about promotion unless I like a thing sincerely. And I'll throw something under the bus when it sucks. And I'll say when I really truly love something. RDBX Shill. You know what? It sounds like it, but No, I'm having a legitimate moment here. SBCs are coming out of the word. What is that about? I don't even know what that is. What's an SBC? If you want an early break, go for it. Come back in an hour. All right, I'll do that. Now, you guys talk about you can like download this and download single board computers are cool. Oh, SBCs, yeah, that's right. Duh. Yeah, sorry I didn't make that reference. SBCs, an hour but 10 minutes. Okay, an hour and 10 minutes. You're saying I can take an hour and 10 minutes break? All right, sir. Let me end this. Let's go back to my schedule and make sure I'm on schedule. So maybe that will give you guys time to actually do something with it. Oh, I was making yeah, that's another topic for another day. I'm doing a whole bash completion page. It's not quite done yet though. And there's all the passwords for over the wire, which I miss. Can I just say I miss playing with over the wire? I'm gonna really look forward to getting back to doing some over the wire and some, Pico and some. I'm paying for Hack the Box. I'm mailing it to it. I'm just yammering at this point. My break is almost here. Let's see. NVIDIA just released one that trumps their Nano, both of which run Linux as an OS. Nice. So actually, you know what? Thank you for that, because guess what? That is on topic. Because the next topic is, man, I got a lot of stuff open. John McFarlane. This is what happens when you do research while you write. So let me pull up the schedule again. I assume this is the last one. Yep. All right. So let me pull up the schedule and let's see, week 02, and then I'll take my little break. So this is actually we talked about we actually skipped over it. You can get a Raspberry Pi and have Linux and not have to do anything else, and it works on hardware and it's super fun. Just know I'm not against Arduino. We're actually going to do an Arduino project in the C in the weeks where we do head for C. There's an Arduino project in there, but we're not. When I'm talking about a Raspberry Pi comes with Linux. It's called Raspbian. Depends on how you say it. So yeah, so that's a thing. And so we're talking about single board computers, SBCs, and that is Raspbian. Yeah, Raspbian is a Debian derivative, which we saw on the first day of this week while we were looking about different versions of Linux. So I just jumped over that. We did create a usable thumb drive and then flash the drive. Okay, so I am definitely going to take a break now, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about one of the least understood, scariest things to understand in all of Linux and Unix world, and all of computers, frankly, and it's all about the boot process. And if there's one thing that can really frustrate you, and just when you think you have a handle on the boot process, they change something on you, which is how I feel about UEFI, and we'll talk about that when I come back. So I'm going to turn up the music and start some fishies for you. But we're going to be talking all about the boot process when we come back. All right, I'll be back at I'll be back at 12:10. All right. So if you want, go make yourself a USB stick or two while you're waiting. What are you guys talking about? To provide cloud service? Which org am I going to sell out for next? Oh my god. Really? Raspberry Pi, I'll sell it for them. You know, if only it were true, if only I actually got money for peddling their stuff. Fun fact, I was actually approached by a keyboard manufacturer to use one of their keyboards for free. Turns out it's the exact same keyboard that Primagian is using. So I'm wondering if that's where he got his. Yeah, so here, we'll send you a keyboard for free. Anyone you want. I said, no. I think it's up to you, Xsud. If you're here to watch it, fine. Just if you do ask a question that's already been covered, then we'll just say we already covered that. No offense. Because we have a very limited amount of time. Even though we're 16 weeks long. But do you have a keyboard cam? Yeah, you're not legit until you have a keyboard cam so people can see those fingers moving, man. Gotta see those fingers. I mean, there's no better use of screen real estate than showing everybody how well you type. Just a little good-natured fun, Primagian, if you're actually watching this. Do not use Emacs. It's on my stupid advice list. And I have 3 minutes to justify that statement. I don't like making sweeping conclusions without justifying them. So let me just send you to the place to go read all about why I think Emacs is a bad choice for most people. I absolutely think the right person can use Emacs without a problem. So if you go to rwx.gg/stupid, you'll see... Please don't pick Emacs just cuz. So, 2 minutes to rant with my coffee. Emacs is used by people who rarely use more than one computer terminal. VI is used by people who want to be functional on any computer. So, do I hate you because you're an Emacs user? No. I am not hating on you as an Emacs user, nor am I even hating on Emacs. Emacs is a fantastic tool for the right person. Problem is, that person is probably not you. It's very unlikely that you only want to use... Oh, let's see. Do you ever use Unet bootin to put Linux on flash drives? I do not. I use Balena only. And tell me, I've tried a lot of them. That one I've tried, I think, a while ago. There's another one somebody mentioned, LX bootin. I think there's another one. There is a specific Linux tool for making Linux ISOs. The reason, let me justify that statement. The reason that I believe in using Balena above those other tools is because it works for everything. Okay, it's not just for making Linux ISO, ISO sticks, thumb drives, whatever you want to call them. It's good for everything, which means, you can take any image. You could make like a RetroPie, image if you wanted to, or any kind of image, and make a USB stick out of it. And whether or not it's an OS or not, it can make anything. So that's why. No, Rufus is not the best. I just spent the last 60 minutes talking about that. So I'm not going to go back. Go back and watch the video. Okay. Rufus is not the first time. And now you're the first time hearing Balena. I mean, I've already covered it. So again, no, I'm not angry. I'm just informing you. And sometimes those two things could get confused. Okay, so what are we doing right now? Let's go back to the schedule. And this time I'll read the schedule from rwx.gg to use links for people like me who get easily distracted by pictures or movie clips. Me too. And if you're using it, you're in that camp. And I really like that. Yelling facts is not raging, guys. Chill. Stating facts loudly on a stream. I mean, you want to see raging. I could cite several examples of raging. Of course I rage too, but of other streamers who live in the rage. They live in the rage. I state facts all day to my kids. Just don't rage quit. Yes. TLDR, use Blender Etcher to make your Linux thumb drives. The end. All right, so we're now going to talk about train crash stream. LOL. Which is the train crash stream? Oh, we got raided. Yay. I love getting raided. Oh, BeginBot. BeginBot's our good friend. You know what? BeginBot, I wish you were on. I try to raid people, like, and our timing is off, man, because I want to raid you sometimes too, but it's like when the raid comes, you're just not there. So we need to time that better. Yeah. Tomb Raid. Ooh, Tomb Raid. Yeah. Good memories there. All right, so let's get back on task. We're going to actually talk about one of the toughest topics in all of Unix and computing, and I'm a little nervous because I'm actually thankful that I have so many people here who have so much experience. He has to go to work, but starts around 3 hours ago. Yeah, that's our timing. We have a little bit of an overlap because I noticed he comes over here a little bit. That's nice. Appreciate that. So for those of you just joined, we've been ranting and raging about Linux on hard drives. I mean, on what do I want to say? On hardware, iron today. So today is all about running Windows on hardware. And we talked about how to find a computer. We're just starting our next segment. It's going to run for 40 minutes, 45 minutes until 5:02, and then I'll take another break. And then the final segment today, this segment's on the boot process, and then we're going to talk about how to make your computer safe, your hardware in particular, how to keep it safe, and briefly talk about the benefits of dual booting. As I mentioned earlier today, we did talk about the difficulty today is that this entire day is about hardware, and you can't come in. I can't help you do your hardware. And this is one area where I want to say, I know the COVID thing, it sucks, but if you have any access to a family member or somebody who's done this, yeah, secure, unsecure boot, that's all those questions. We need to go through all of that. The boot process is really a pain. And this is a kind of thing, the thing that makes it so hard for me to document. In fact, I really, really want to, once I finish my first round of Banner Boost and have content developed and everything, I want to make a system that's doing kind of a screen feed, so I can show another system booting and I can record that. And I'm going to put a plea out there to the people on the stream. If anybody would like to, either with just a phone, if they like to, there's not enough video content of the different BIOSes, the different boot sequences from all the different manufacturers out there. And what I would really like to start collecting is video walkthroughs of how to set the boot order and UEFI and that kind of stuff, secure boot or not, because there's just not a lot of content about that because it's so hard to capture, because you can't do it from a stream because you have to reboot your computer. So unless you have a video camera or you've set up some way to have a monitor that feeds like a lot of these gamers do, and I do have the equipment for that, I just haven't set it up yet. It's super hard to understand what's going on. I do have an HDMI capture card. I have the capture card. I just haven't set it up yet. And of course, with a capture card, you'd have to send it up to just one computer that I have here, and I can show you the MSI, BIOS. But there are hundreds of different BIOSes out there, and so let me what is a BIOS? Let's talk about that first. But what I'm getting at is that there's so many different BIOSes out there that you have to really learn about yours. And if you're lucky, you'll be able to search it and find information on it. But so many BIOS, particularly if it's old hardware, if it's really old hardware and you're trying to breathe life into it with Linux, there's a good chance your BIOS is going to be easy enough to understand that it's not going to break you in your brain trying to figure it out. But Some of the new BIOSes are a little bit more complicated. They bury things in really weird places, and so it's kind of like a treasure hunt to figure out how to get your, and not to mention the fact that it's terrifying if you're a beginner. Because why? Because you're in there playing with the BIOS, and the BIOS is literally the lowest level operating system of your computer. So that brings us on topic again. Sense UEFI in particular, and they don't know what that is yet, a lot of them. So we're going to talk about that. So let's recap this. If we spend more than one segment on that, so be it. This process, even though I have a really hard time demonstrating any of it to you, the best I can do is kind of talk you through how to get a handle on it for yourself. And talk about being an autodidact. If there was never a segment that required you to be an autodidact more than now, this is it. So start taking notes. Take your notes, experiment with different things, write down what worked and what didn't work. Make sure that's all in your notes, because you're going to have to come back to that. In fact, I am so paranoid when I make a new system that I have a pen and paper right next to me, and I write every single step for building that system down. Because I can't do it with Markdown, because either that or I have a laptop. If I have a laptop next to me, I'm like writing every single step down, because I want to be able to recreate that system exactly as I just did. And if I don't have the creation order, people do this for Arch all the time, but you should generally get in the habit of doing that for any build, because you're going to miss a step. You're going to be like, and you're going to screw something up, and you're going to need to redo it. So you're going to have to roll back, and you have to do your steps again. And if you don't have those steps written down, you won't remember them. And that is what being autodidact is. Somebody who not only learns on their own, but who is meticulous about recording their learning. Think about Thomas Edison, people like that. Those are the kind of people you need to start kind of like channeling when you're doing this, because you are going to get really blown away with all the different options, and it's up to you to document your own options, and it's up to you to do the learning, because I can't tell you how to do it for every single one. Tesla versus Edison. I'm actually more in the Edison camp after recently seeing some documentary stuff on Edison versus Tesla myself. But notes are one of the greatest tools in the toolbox. Yes, you should definitely do it. And they're underrated. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a beginner start a thing and say, okay, well, what did you do? What's the name of your BIOS? What's your motherboard? What CPU do you have? And they go, I don't know. I knew once, but I don't know now. Well, write it down. Write it down. It's like, write it down. And if you want to, use Markdown and publish it so your notes are in saved on GitLab or GitHub. Right? And then share your notes. Share your notes with somebody else. That's what the whole knowledge world, README world, exchange is all about, is sharing your notes with others so they can benefit from it too. And they used to do this all the time. In the Edison and the Tesla days, there were people that were writing correspondence about their discoveries constantly. What happened? A lot of people will write blogs to do this. Yeah, turn your blogs into notes. This is, by the way, we're going to have a whole week on that, the entire week, about how to manage your notes and publish them and share them and search them. All these great things. That is all coming on in the schedule on week, which week is this? So that's week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Week 6. Week 6 is all about structuring data and managing your knowledge. And that includes all of your notes, sharing them, searching them, and everything else. And I'll be doing a lot of Pandoc, a lot of Markdown. We'll do advanced Pandoc Markdown, not just basic Markdown. If you want to read about all that Markdown stuff and how to take notes, go to rdbx.gg/basic mark for basic Markdown, or just /MD for Markdown if you want to read about that. So this is kind of a side note, but since we're talking about notes, might as well mention it. All right, so let's get into this, because there's going to be lots of notes to take right here, and I'm and so knowledge management is a seriously big skill. I'm going to spend an entire week just on knowledge management. If you can't get a handle on your own knowledge management, you're done as a technologist. So there's just no way you'll be able to keep up. You'll write really awesome notes, and then you won't be able to find them again. How many times on stream have I not been able to find my stuff since I broke my search engine? Right? So you definitely need to know how to search all that and everything. Okay, so the first step is to take the notes and put those notes in some form that it's digital, and I believe really strongly that form should be basic Pandoc Markdown. And so if you want to read about that, rdbx.gg/basic mark is where you can read about that. So anyway, here's a bunch of notes coming at you. And I think we have plenty of time, even if we need to dive into the next segment. Week 6 seems so far away. I know, I seem like I should, you know what, we covered that in the first week. We covered how to take notes and process them in week 1. And what's happening is that people have joined us since then and didn't see week 1. And so they missed that day. So if you want to go back, there's already a video on that. It was very succinct and went through it pretty quickly. But we're going to spend a whole week on it in week 6. But I don't feel like I can go back, and I've already pretty much talked about this too much today, because I feel like, you know, we can't spend too much time on content that's already been covered or will be covered again. So just practice your notes. But we really have to talk about these terms. And the reason I put Grok in here is because I just want you to learn about it. I want you to learn about it on your own. I'm going to give you some knowledge here. I'm going to share some, 40 minutes of knowledge on this boot order thing. And if you think that you're going to truly get your head around the boot process in 40 minutes, no. Just no. You are going to have lots and lots of experience with this, which is why we talked about virtual machines yesterday and all the ways that you can practice with a virtual machine. It's why we just talked about hardware. You can go find some broken ass computer out there and just beat it up by installing multiple versions of Linux on it. You will brick the hard drive. You will do it multiple times. In fact, you might even want to brick the hard drive and see if you can recover the hard drive after bricking it. All of these things are going to give you really low level knowledge of this boot process. And frankly, the boot process is one of those things that this experience of playing around with all the different boot processes is going to be the core way that you master the knowledge. So whether you want to certify or you just want to be a successful Linux administrator or SRE or whatever, the best way to do this is to mess with it. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about some things you can kind of do around that. So first one is know what the BIOS is. If I remember right, BIOS stands for Basic Input Operating System. Let's go check that out. What is a BIOS? All right. Yep, there we go. BIOS is firmware used for a specific hardware initialization during the boot process, powering on, and to provide runtime services. That means while your computer is running for operating systems and programs. So that was a quick little search there. Okay, so the next one. So let's talk about the boot process. And I am going to put that first here. Boot process. All right, so what is the boot process? Okay, now this has gotten way complicated today. So all of you who can flex about how much you understand about the boot process, I just want you to stay quiet for a bit so I can talk about the basic way. Let's not bring UEFI into the mix yet. Okay, people? It's boot. Did I put book? Oh my God. Thank you. It's because my fingers just type. They don't even ask my brain what they're doing lots of times. Okay, so boot process. What is the boot process? Yes, post, go pi. All right, so what is the largest difference a BIOS can make to a system? Okay, a keyboard. Good thing I don't have a keyboard cam. There wouldn't be room for other things. All right, so when you flip the power, all right, your computer can't run without an operating system. So what is an operating system? What is an operating system? I'm like channeling your own autodidact. An operating system is system software that manages computer hardware, software resources, and provides common services for computer programs. All right, so the operating system is what's doing everything. And it's funny because, in the old days, very old days, there was actually a job title called computer. And if you want to do the research on this, it's really interesting. A computer was a person who did computations or who and passed it around. And there were actually operating systems that were people. And they would have a manager, and they would make sure that all the information was getting where it needed to be. And they thought that was really fancy when they had vacuum tubes, and they would put things in vacuum tubes. And so that's what I'm just saying is it's like that's what your operating system is. Your operating system is a system for managing how everything talks to itself. I mean, how the CPU, and I'm in my prereqs, I'm expecting you to know what a CPU, a memory, all that stuff is. But all of those things on your computer need to talk to each other, and they need to know what to do, and they need to not interrupt each other. That's what an interrupt request is called, by the way. It's pretty complicated, but your computer is basically a big loop. And that loop is which is at light speed, is happening, and every single thing that your computer does has to happen in that loop. And that's gotten more complicated now with multiple, CPUs and stuff like that. But that's the bus is a way of communicating between all of these devices. And so all of that stuff has to be managed, and that's what your operating system is there for. And whether it's Linux or Windows or whatever, that's what's making it run. Now here's the catch. Okay, when you turn the power on in your computer, Windows doesn't run. Your Mac doesn't run. Mac might actually do it, but the Linux system doesn't run. The very first operating system that runs on your computer is the BIOS. And so what we're trying to say here is that when you get a computer from the manufacturer, it comes with an operating system, and it's not Windows. Every single motherboard comes with an operating system. Oh, they have a BIOS simulator? God bless you, smart refrigerator. Look at that, man. Look at this. You can go play with the BIOS. This is fantastic. Oh, wow. This is so great. I'll have to come play with this. This is great. Everybody see his link, guys? You can come back and play with that. Tron for the win. Kids, watch Tron. Yeah, definitely watch Tron. Yeah, I actually have a link to Tron on my site, rwx.gg/Tron. So, let's go back to on topic. So what is the BIOS? So the BIOS runs. Now the BIOS is an operating system that comes with your motherboard, usually. It's not a part of your motherboard. It's either soldered into your motherboard as a chip, or it's pluggable into your motherboard. And that's called a ROM, by the way. So a ROM is a read-only memory. And ROM, the term read-only memory is sort of all over the place now with SSD, which is, these are technically, your thumb drives technically are ROM that can be reflashed and changed all the time. So it's kind of blurred the lines between read-only memory and memory that can be written. But in the case of your BIOS, it is definitely firmware, which means, and what is it? Why do they call it firmware? Because it's more firm than software, right? Software can be changed out all the time. Firmware cannot. In fact, to change firmware, you have to flash your firmware, which is a terrifying thing to do, because if you lose power, that chip is gone and it can't be flashed again. If I'm overstating that, someone take me up on that. But yeah, so your BIOS is firm. He keeps his BIOS in shape. So the BIOS, the important thing with the BIOS to understand is that it is the thing that starts first. And so power is sent to the BIOS, and all of that, and it is responsible at the very, very, very low level. Machine code, BIOSes are usually written in assembly or really low level C, and they're talking, it's more of an electronics thing than anything else. So that's firmware. And lots of things have firmware besides computers, by the way. In fact, if you've ever noticed, your set-top boxes, which are technically computers, but there's all kinds of electronics that also have firmware. This goes for microchip PIC, microprocessors. Your Christmas lights have firmware on them. And, hypothetically, you could actually change the firmware on your Christmas lights. So firmware is the low-level coding that goes into really tiny chips that are responsible for getting you to the next thing, usually. In the case of BIOS, that's what it is. It's a basic input operating system. USB is an EEPROM. Yeah, so that's good. Thank you for mentioning that. I should probably put that in my notes. We should dig into what an EEPROM is a little bit more. I don't know if we should talk about it right now, but so yeah, anytime you run, EEPROM. So these are all the tiny little OSs. So what he's saying is when you plug in a USB drive, it actually also has its own firmware on it that allows it to then do other things with the rest of the USB stick. So all of these devices have this stuff, and what does it do? So you only care about this because you want to know what it does next. Well, the main job of the BIOS is take care of all the devices at the lowest level. So this is where you're going to go, like in my MSI BIOS, you can go change, you can overclock, you can check up, the power, the heat of your devices. You can, turn off the numpad. You can change the function keys by default. But most importantly, you can change what device gets to run next, what device gets to boot next. And that's what a boot order is. Okay, so actually boot order comes, we'll do bootloaders and then partitions. So what this is so your BIOS runs, and most of the time if you don't push F12 or anything like that, it just goes and it hands off all of the control of the system to the next thing. And the next thing is the disk drive, the bootloader, usually the disk, but this is where it gets tricky. So disks can be separated into partitions. And as far as the BIOS is concerned, those partitions are kind of like separate devices. They're separate block devices. And so, there are a lot of old, there's lots of stuff to take in there, but basically your disk can be chopped up into lots of pieces. And when you install the operating system onto a hard drive, it does that usually for you. In Linux, as everybody was talking about, you can set up how many partitions you want, where you want them, how you want them to work. You can even put an entire operating system in a different partition and split your disk in half, and then have that partition have sub-partitions. It gets really hairy really fast, which is why things like Pop! OS and Mint are better for you when you start out, because they take care of all of that for you. Now, eventually, you're going to want to install Arch, and you're going to do your own partitioning and understand what that means. But why do we care when it comes to booting? Well, if a partition has not been set to boot, that means that partition cannot take over control from something else, handing over control. There's only basically one partition or one sort of operating system in control at any time. And so it's like transfers the control over to that partition. And this is a hard one. I'm going to try to fight off talking about the MBR and Grub and UEFI, but we're going to get there. So just suffice it to say that there's more going on than handing over control to that partition. That is a summation of lots of stuff that happens. But you can effectively think of it like you're turning the power on. Okay, so basically control goes to the BIOS. And then the BIOS goes, okay, where's my hard drive? Which one am I going to send it to control to? And your BIOS sends a control to the boot partition of your hard drive. And the boot partition of your hard drive says, okay, now who gets control? And then it gives control to one of your other disk partitions that has an operating system in it. And then that starts up, and that's when you start to see your whole operating system come to life. And so that's what's happening during the boot process. So the boot process starts out with the BIOS. Well, it starts out with power, and then it starts out with the BIOS, and then the BIOS hands over control to a boot partition of a disk someplace. And then that boot partition hands over control to a main partition. Sometimes the boot partition can also be the main partition, but not always. And then your computer comes up. Now, if anything goes wrong in that process, you end up with a system with a flashing cursor that doesn't do anything, or something that says hard drive error, can't find a hard drive, or if your BIOS is screwed up, that's even worse. You might not even get to see anything on your screen because the BIOS controls sending stuff to your screen, even in a very blue screeny kind of way. There's no graphics. MSI has graphics and what's their face? Dell has a pretty good graphical BIOS, but usually a BIOS is a text interface almost always. They almost always buy, what is it, Ameritrends is like one of the biggest BIOSes that you'll see, and it's this blue and white. You'll see so many of those. MSI has a big fancy dragons everywhere on it, but every time you run one of those, you're running a tiny little bitty operating system that does only the minimal things to show you on the screen, enough so that you can change. In fact, it's rare to find mouse support in a BIOS, but these days it's starting to show up more and more. So that's the process. Let's see, what are the advantages of partitions over simply virtualizing things? Are you talking about like if you were going to have a dual boot? We are going to talk about dual booting later. The biggest advantage is that you're running on hardware. Okay, so for example, this system I have now is a dual boot Windows machine. If and when, I don't know when that would be, I ever want to like play Witcher or Cyberpunk 2077 when it comes out, there's no way I'm going to play that in a virtual machine. Even with GPU pass-through, which some virtualization software has. We talked about virtualization yesterday. I don't want to get into it, but it's almost always slower. So yeah, you have to put the virtualized file somewhere. It has to go on a partition, right? I had a motherboard that came with Tiny Linux on OS. It was nice. Ooh, that's super cool. A motherboard that came with Tiny Linux on board? That is super cool. Can you send me the name of that XSOT? That'd be so great to have a backup. Yeah. Dual boot of Ubuntu from Windows. A lot of people do a dual boot from Ubuntu and Windows. We're going to spend our entire section talking about the pros and cons of dual booting. I don't want to get into that right now. I want to finish on this boot process thing. We're almost done, and then we can get into whether you should dual boot or not, and stuff. Okay, it's a pretty controversial topic. I've changed my opinion on it several times. Largely, the answer is it depends. It depends on what you want to do, and it depends on the hardware that you're using, and it depends on the operating system. So back to disk partitions. So disk partitions are how your disk is divided and used by your system. Rather than get on the weeds on this, I'll let you study it. A lot of times when you're this, I'm going to say one gotcha. A lot of times when you're dealing with partitions, you actually have to explicitly remove the partitions from an old hard drive. And when you're going through the install process, and the reason for that is because it won't free the disk space up until you remove the partition. Now, be careful when you do that. So, for example, Windows and Macs both come with a special partition, a partition that is designed to be the fail-safe if your computer ever dies and your main partition crashes. And so when you boot into recovery mode on those systems, it's designed for, like mainstream people. It's not designed for you because you're going to be a Linux person. So, but it's designed for mainstream people. So when they reboot, do you want to recover it? And what it does is it your BIOS, so technically your BIOS hands over control to the bootloader, which is another program that we'll talk about in the boot partition. And then that asks the question, what do you want to do? And say, hey, I see that your main partition is hosed. I want to should I run recovery? And when it does recovery, it goes to the system. It sends control to the system boot, to the recovery partition. And then that runs the whole installation process for you. If you don't have that, so in the case of Mac, the BIOS itself is smart enough to download the entire operating system from the internet. In fact, it is the only, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Mac OS, the Mac BIOS, is the only BIOS I have ever encountered that has an IP stack. In other words, it can download and communicate with the internet at the BIOS level. That is not something I have ever seen in any other hardware BIOS. And it's pretty cool. Because I mean, if you can like totally hose a Mac, I mean like completely and totally hose it up, like so that none of its disks work or anything, and you can still recover it over the internet if it still has a BIOS. Another short of like frying the firmware on the thing, you can still recover it. And I gotta, I slam on Apple all the time. It is almost like a universal backdoor. I slam on Apple all the time, but the ability to do that in their BIOS is pretty dang cool. I mean, that is, most modern BIOS have an IP stack, PXE boot. See, thanks. I knew somebody would correct me on this. I haven't been looking that closely at BIOSes recently, and most of the BIOSes I use, as you know, are older BIOSes because I'm redoing systems. But if you're going to buy a new system and it has an IP stack, that would be really, really great. You had a Mac that got bricked, but yeah, IP recovery is still really nice. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, maybe. So Hackintosh, let's not talk about Hackintosh right now. I don't think it's a good idea. First of all, it's illegal. And secondly, why? I don't care. Other than like emulating stuff on Apple to see if you're writing software that's compatible with Apple, I have no desire to okay. Yeah, so it's straight up illegal. There's no way you can make a Hackintosh legally. There's no way around the law on that. So I mean, it's up to you, because it's universal backdoor, but Mac refuses to give you credits to the feds. Possibly true. I don't know. So anyway, so these partitions. So let's just briefly go over what partition types there are. I'm just going to tell you there are different partition types, and I'm not going to get into the weeds about what types of partition types are used for things. There is, these days, I'm going to get, people are going to throw fruit at me, but these days, you really don't need a lot of partitions. Here that comes, they're going to throw fruit. You don't. You just don't. You can use one massive partition. And I lived in a time when suggesting something like that would get you like lynched. You must have a home partition. You must have a swap partition. You must have a boot partition. You must have a this and this and this. Okay, by the way, we're not going to talk about SSDs and why you should never have a swap partition. These are all in the weeds topics. We're still at the high level, so I'm trying to, maybe these are topics, if you hear about them, you'll know to go look for them. Okay, so one of the questions you should ask yourself is, based on the hard drive I have, what kind of partitioning should I use? You know, those are the kind of, the first question is, do I want to partition at all? And 9 times out of 10, most people that are getting into Linux don't even need to deal with the partitions. So stay with Pop! OS and just put your partition on and just know that that's there. This is supposed to be for beginners, but if you're asked to do partitions, now you'll know what they're asking for. And you can say, no, I would rather not right now. And when they ask you the next question, do you want to encrypt your partition? We'll talk about that in the security section in the next segment. We do need to talk about MBR, but I don't know that we need to talk about that for beginners. The MBR stands for the master boot record, and you just know it's a thing, okay? Can we not go there? I mean, I really want people to understand it eventually. I don't think it's a beginner topic to understand what an MBR is. The master boot record is it 512 bytes still? It's the first bit of data right at the beginning of the boot partition that says what else to do after that. I know, and here comes the biggest piece of crap that has ever hit us, and I cannot find a way to like this. So I don't even know what it stands for, but it's UEFI. So, yay, 360 bandwidth works. So, UEFI. Why do you care about UEFI? I just wish I could cover this in a way that would be easy for everybody to understand. The addition of UEFI has made the installation of Linux really hard, and if there is one thing I have, unbelievably everything fits inside, to get rid of the BIOS, excrement for idiots. People hate it. If you have a legacy BIOS, you don't have to deal with UEFI. I'm going to overly simplify this for everyone, hopefully. UEFI was a ploy by Windows and Intel to create a way to authorize secure hardware. In other words, prevent Linux from being installed. And it was a massive thing. In fact, the picture of Linus Torvalds flipping the camera off, I'm pretty sure that's him flipping off the camera because of the UEFI edition. And what they claimed, and they still hold by this claim, and it seems like the whole industry is going along with it, is that it was to protect you from one thing hackers can do. So, you know all that stuff about sticking USB drive in and booting it? Well, if you watch Mr. Robot or any other hacker show, they'll walk up to a computer, stick a USB drive in it, reboot the computer, have it boot off the USB drive, and own the whole computer. And it's very easy to do that if it's running in legacy mode. Because why? Because you bypassed all of the security of the system. In case you're wondering, the best counter to that is to encrypt your hard drives. The end. They can't get to that. They can't even if they bypass all your BIOS, doesn't matter. Your disks are encrypted. That is the single best protection against that. And, you know, they'll tell you to have a BIOS password. No, just encrypt your hard drives. You're good to go. Because then no matter what, that data on those hard drives is not coming off there. But if you don't have that and you're operating in the old world, you walk up to a system, you stick a USB. They have things called rubber ducks actually that actually are automated You know what? Encryption does not slow down your performance. This is one of the biggest myths, and we're gonna talk. We're jumping ahead to the next segment, so let's stay on topic, and we'll come back to that. But that's a great question. Remind me about that later. So we have our US. So what was I talking about? Bootloaders, UEFI. So this UEFI was added so to say you are not an authorized operating system. I am not going to allow you to boot. And so that meant that even if you put Linux on your partition and your hard drive, that because it wasn't approved by whoever, it was not allowed to. It was not allowed to boot. We're going to talk about Rubber Ducky next segment, please, not now. So UEFI was originally designed to protect us. Now, most people in the Linux community believe that I've talked to believe that UEFI was a ploy to fight against Linux. I don't believe that anymore. I used to. I think that all of the actions that between Intel and Windows since that time, including WSL too, have suggested that Microsoft as an organization is not anti-Linux as would necessarily be the case if they were creating some sort of conspiracy against Linux to prevent it from being installed. So I think that they may have actually legitimately been trying to create a safe hardware strategy to prevent this ability to just boot off whatever and bypass all the security on the system, which is very doable. It's kind of fun, actually. So that's why UEFI was added. Now, how do you deal with UEFI? Well, thank God you don't have to deal with UEFI anymore. Pop OS, one of the brilliant things about Pop OS, I am blown away by the brilliance of the engineers behind Pop OS. You guys, next time, you guys, when you pull up Pop OS and you see the cute little robots and everything, and you're like, oh, this is not a real operating system. Look at the stuff under the hood that it does to make it a simple installation process. Not to mention the fact that it completely and totally takes care of UEFI setup for you without doing anything to your boot process. Think about that for a second. Last time you, and if you don't understand what I'm saying, get some old hardware it's not so old that it still has UEFI on it. Okay, get some UEFI hardware. Make yourself a Linux Mint USB stick, the latest one. Okay, and install an operating system from Linux Mint on that same hardware under UEFI. And you'll notice it won't work. You'll have to go change your settings in your BIOS to allow secure boot or to disable secure boot or do legacy or all that. And it's beyond the scope of this to tell you about all of that other than that it exists. And then do the same thing with Pop OS. When you put a Pop OS thing and you reboot, it doesn't care. It detects whatever is on, whatever the BIOS is set to, and it figures it out. And I can't tell you how brilliant that is. Those engineers, and they actually very briefly allude to some of the things that they have done to the OS to make it just work. Another one is that they, at great controversy, have just made hardware work that is proprietary. So stuff like NVIDIA and stuff. That stuff is already pre-configured out of the box. There's no extra thing you have to do. And so if you're a beginner, at this point, I was unsure about Pop OS when I first started streaming 2 months ago, but after now having helped 5 or 6 people who are under the age of 13 install an operating system on their hardware with no problems at all, I am a massive Pop OS fanboy. I just cannot tell you how easy it is to take care of that stuff. Secure boot and fast boot will still give you a nightmare when converting from a box from Windows to Pop OS. Be sure to disable those before trying. Okay, so yeah, so what they're talking about is worth us mentioning. It's so UEFI is often associated with secure boot, and I don't know. And if there's one thing that I want to get my head around again, it's the actual UEFI boot process, because it kind of fits in between your Grub bootloader and other bootloaders. That most of the time there's a UEFI bootloader, and that's a little program that runs that tries to decide what comes next. It comes after your BIOS. It's not your BIOS, so your BIOS runs, right? And then there's this little program called your bootloader that runs, And it used to be that that was it. The bootloader would then go decide what to run. And you can actually bypass the bootloader and go straight to a disk that has an MBR. I know this is in the weeds, but and you don't even have a bootloader. But what you have now, and this is what gets really confusing, is you have a BIOS that boots, and then you have UEFI bootloader that boots, and then UEFI bootloader boots Grub, and then Grub boots on top of that, which is another bootloader for Linux. And so now you have two bootloaders that are kind of piggybacking on each other before you ever get to the system that you want to run. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's either the UEFI bootloader in Windows or it's the Grub bootloader, which has been made to be more intelligent and it now knows about UEFI. Either way, this is complicated, and I wish it weren't as complicated. So what do? All right, the bottom line for you is this. If you're going to keep UEFI active, which is the first thing I would do is I would just to try to install Pop! OS out of the box. Like just, plug it in and try to do it. And 9 times out of 10, it will just work. And you won't have to mess with the BIOS. You won't have to push F12 or F11 or whatever your key is to go in there and change anything. You'll just be able to boot. The only thing you'll maybe have to change is booting off of the USB stick. So that almost always you'll have to change. So you go change that and say, I want to boot off my USB stick. Now you boot off the USB stick and then you, it does, if it's Pop! OS, it seems to know the right thing to do. If it barks at you while it's going through any of that process of installation, you might have to do what it says. It might tell you to go change to disable secure boot, which is the most common way that you'll read about it. It means that you need to open your BIOS again, go find where secure boot is. I wish I could show you this, and disable secure boot. It's sometimes called enabling legacy mode. And what that'll do is just basically turn off UEFI. Now, if you want UEFI because of some of the, and I'll tell you some reasons you might want it. For example, if you're running Linux Mint Cinnamon, I have found that unless you have UEFI enabled properly, the NVIDIA proprietary drivers won't even load. So when you boot up your scene, when your screen is all screwed up and you're stuck at like 800 by 600 resolution, and it's because your NVIDIA drivers didn't load because it doesn't even boot the NVIDIA drivers unless UEFI is enabled. And it's that's like way more information than a beginner should ever have to know. I have never once had that issue with Pop! OS. And I've been installing on old Acers and MSI Tridents. I've got now like 3 or 4 or 5 different kind of computers that I've done Pop! OS on with no problem. So let's say it happened to me the first time out of the box. Let's say it's the anti-Linux part you were just talking about. It might be, yeah. Happened to me the first time. Well, my latest BIOS related solution regarding Linux suspends sleep configuration to work with Linux, or the laptop might catch fire while off. That's true too. So that, that's worth mentioning, that, and that goes in the security section almost. When you are starting up, you gotta know that your computer is not going to do things. So I actually burned out my laptop battery on my Dell, and I have a feeling it might have been related to the fact that I was running Linux on it, because I don't think it was properly blocking the drainage of the battery, so it was sucking more from the battery than it should have, although it turned out to be a problem with the hardware reported, so it actually bulged the battery out. The point is, don't be afraid, but just know that these are the kind of things that you can actually, if you get them wrong over time, it can actually damage your hardware if you don't configure them correctly. This is another reason that I recommend people stay with well-tested, well-established distros for their beginning hardware, particularly for their beginning hardware. Because, in the old days, if you set your screen resolution refresh rate wrong, you could ruin your screen by running Linux. And so Linux is so powerful that it is actually one of the things that potentially can harm your hardware, because if you run it wrong, it can overly tax certain hardware. So I'm not trying to scare you, but I just want you to know, going into this with your eyes open, to use a distro like Pop! OS, where you've got really professional engineers who are considering these things all the time, and basically their livelihood depends on it because they are making this as a part of their System 76 hardware computer offering. So there's a lot going on there. And then, and Mint is, in my experience, has been the next best one for beginners for that reason. Ubuntu is also very solid. for that reason. This is one of the reasons I don't recommend Arch to absolute beginners, because if they end up putting it on the hardware, they may not just make it difficult for them, but they might misconfigure their monitor or something. Watch sensors is a great CLI deal to keep an eye on temperature sensors, make sure you're not burning things up. Yeah, and that's the other thing about Linux is, you have a lot more tools to use. So Grub is another bootloader. Really all you know about it is it's going to give you an optional menu to pick what you want to boot from. And there's a number of tools there that you can play around with. Init levels, and I need to talk about this in the next 5 minutes. I'm going to go over my time a little. Actually, I think I have enough time to go over all of this in the next segment. I'm going to take a breath and a drink, and I'll come back. This is a lot of talking. I realize it. It's very dense. Hopefully you can shut me down and slow me down. Hopefully we've touched on some topics that you can do, and I'll come back to that in a bit. QBIOS has the default OS and tails on USB. So they're going to be beginners out there. They're going to continue to talk about some of the more advanced topics here. Really, the only takeaway from this segment is you have a boot process. It starts with firmware that's soldered onto your chip. It then transfers control over to a bootloader that's running on your disk drive partitions, and then that transfers control over to your operating system. And why do you care? Because you're going to have to change your boot order to boot off your USB stick, number one. And number two, you're possibly going to need to turn off UEFI secure boot so that Linux can run. That is it. That is the TLDR of this last segment. The rest is a bunch of stuff that you can look at. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do. Let's do more fish. Should we have more fish? Fish first for 15 minutes. When we come back, we're going to talk about dual booting, pros and cons of dual booting. We're going to talk about doing stuff securely. We got into that a little bit already, but when we come back, we're going to talk about how to protect yourself, particularly when you're talking about hardware. Protecting yourself with a virtual machine is not as critical as protecting yourself with hardware. In fact, it might get you fired if you do it wrong. So we're going to talk about that when I come back. No, it's no. Oof! Oh, it's such a great day outside. It is time almost to go outside. It's not quite paddleboard day though. It's like one of those great days where it's kind of like my wife calls them the Seattle days. She used to live in Seattle. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's just kind of overcast and still sort of warm. On a 10-year-old laptop, couldn't even boot the live stream. Good practice. On a 10-year-old laptop, really interesting. Did it even install? I haven't heard of Zorin OS. Don't know what that is. Let's go see what that is. What is Zorin OS? Well, apparently Wikipedia. I mean, not Wikipedia. Zorin the OS. More on new hardware than legacy. That's probably true. I would think that's fair to say, since System 76 is behind it. I think that's probably a fair critique. Linux Mint Cinnamon with Windows theme on my mom's laptop. One core Celeron. Are you kidding? And it worked? Did it work? It went too slow? You're just gonna get software emulation on the graphic stuff, so you just have to turn some stuff off there. But it's not too bad. I've actually had the same thing. I've never heard of it. Zorin OS is a personal computer operating system based on Ubuntu, which is good. That means you get Debian experience. It is marketed as an operating system designed for users new to Linux. Really? Allows users to change the interface to resemble those of Microsoft Windows or Mac OS. What? Comes bundled with Wine? First, today I learned there's a Zorin OS. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm definitely gonna have to play with this. This is worth looking at. Let's look at it right now, actually. Your computer faster. I'll watch the video. Really? I've been looking. I mean, this is the kind of OS that I'm looking for to recommend. Oh my gosh, that's loud. Why is that so loud? Just give me a second here. I'll turn it down. Turn it down a little bit so you guys don't get your ears blown out. OS 2, yes. It didn't work on it, but wow, I'm impressed. They have a video even. Wait a second. Wait. They did just put. Is that Zorin running on a Mac? It got popular because of the video. These are just the standard Unix games. What? Wait a second. Are they running Zorin OS on Android devices? If that's on an Android device, I got 5 Android old smartphones I want to re-image downstairs. I mean, if you have them just for development, virus resistant. Wow. That is one snazzy video right there. I am really impressed by that, not just because of the video, because of the, I mean, this is clearly running on an iPad. Does this, is the Skyrim of distros? Zoran S on your toaster. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I didn't even know about this until today. Once again, the stream is teaching me. Thank God for our community. Obviously, I'm going to install that into a virtual machine right away, mess around with it, and then I'm going to, I mean, this is running on an iPad. If that's truly running on an iPad, I got 16 iPads sitting around doing nothing, that I would love to get something else on. I think the computers might be CGI too. I really do. I don't think they're actual iPads and stuff. Can I say something about GPL? Yeah, sure. This week, licensing is in the weekly topics. However, I did talk about that quite a bit. I think last week. There are so many mods for it. Yeah, I don't know. This looks really, really compelling. iPad sounds like more like raspberries with screens, maybe. I mean, this is the real question: is it truly? I mean, if they're trying to show, look, there's one picture here that has it on a Mac monitor, and I have a lot of Mac hardware, and it does not do well. It depends. I mean, some of the Mac hardware does better than, like the Mac Minis. The 2015 Mac Minis do really well with Mac with Rancher or Pine or even Ubuntu server. I have about 17 of them downstairs running in a server cluster because they're left over from the lab, and so I put Unix on, I put Linux on there. Specifically, I put Ubuntu server on those. So I'm not, so it's, and I actually on my Mac Pro I run Linux on that, but it doesn't have good driver support for the video cards and the USB ports. So I do wonder, if there's any OS that is actually catered to running. The downside of Pop! OS is that it very specifically is meant to support System 76 hardware, and it might not have taken the liberties at making certain things run on Mac, for example, because they don't care. Yeah, so Zoran sounds like it might be worth a look. And this is going in the top of my list of beginner operating systems to evaluate. And that's really what this is about, this being a beginner boost. So there it is, guys. Other beginners out there, you know how to do it. Download the Zoran ISO, make yourself a virtual machine like we talked about yesterday, and maybe try running it on some old hardware. See how well it does. See how that stacks up versus Pop! OS. And such. Check out Zoran's system requirements. Great entry level for Mac users. You're talking about those, yeah. Well, Pop! OS is too. I've actually had 11-year-old kids tell me that they preferred Linux to Mac because it was easier to understand. So the days of a desktop Linux being not attainable or complicated are gone. They just have to obviously have the operating system installed for them. PCI temp power consumption changes with terminal size. So that's interesting. Are you talking about your just on your system? There are 3 versions of Zoran. One dual core is it. 2 gigabytes of RAM, 10 gigabytes of storage, a basic display, Zoran S Lite. What? Single core? They have a light version. Oh my God. So I'm thinking Zoran OS Lite all the way for that old Windows 98 hardware. See what I'm saying? Thank you so much for bringing this up. Who brought it up? I should VIP them. This is fantastic. I cannot wait to try this. For normal users, the one, and for light users. Yeah, but see, this is, so one of the toughest questions I've had to face is Zoran OS Lite for fast VMs too, perhaps. Oh, yeah. 512 megabytes of RAM, can't even run a single Electron app. Was it you, Barra? All right, well, you're my man. So definitely have to Twitch. I don't even know if my Twitch command is working these days. I've been ripping it apart so much. We'll just see if it actually works. Okay, so Yeah, I mean, this is right in the conversation about running on old hardware. You know what I want to try? It's actually a bad idea to run anything but Raspberry on Raspberry Pis. I've found out because the distros don't support it because they've got all the ARM packages in the Raspberry distros, and those ARM packages are not. So if you want to install software on Raspberry Pi, you kind of want to stick with it. There's not a lot of good package software support for any of the other distros for Raspberry Pi, which runs on an ARM chip, which is not an Intel chip or it's not an Intel compatible chip, we'll say. Arch has Arch ARM Linux. I know, but I don't know that it's got the same amount of software support. I would bet that Arch has much more support than Ubuntu for Raspberry Pi, which absolutely is atrocious. I mean, trying to run a Ubuntu server on a Raspberry Pi is just a no. It's just a fail. Don't do it. So just stick with Raspberry. But Arch probably would have that. I have Arch on a Raspberry Pi. I think Arch would have a better shot at doing that. Anyway, so what are we doing? We're talking about security is what we're doing, and dual booting. So actually, researching your computer type, identify the setup sequence. We talked about all that. Change your boot order. We talked about needing to do that. If you don't know what that means, you're going to need to do some research. I've said it all along. I can't give you all the answers. You're going to research it. But now you know what to research. So dual booting. Dual booting is a massively controversial topic every time it comes up, and it's even controversial in my head. This is one of the things that I change my mind about every 4 months. I change my mind on it. And this is why I get a nickname like Flip Flop Raw, because when I encounter something that does not have one best answer, I tend to go back and forth between the two all the time. And Tails OS, yes, I totally know about Tails. We talked about that. Tails is a secure OS, by the way, guys, that uses the Tor network by default inside of the operating system. But the Tor network itself is now questionably, I don't know. We're not going to talk about Tails. Tails is a valid conversation when it comes to a safe operating system. So it is, Tails is sort of on topic because it is an operating system that by default is perhaps the most secure operating system on the planet. If you want to just install an OS and be ultra paranoid about security. So it's like, it comes with, encryption, disk encryption. It comes with all the stuff we're going to talk about. But it also comes by using the Tor network by default. So I don't even think you can do anything but the Tor network with Tails. Depending on how focused you are on security, you might want to look at a different OS distro. But before we go there fully, let's come back to the Cube. Yes, Snowden recommends CubeOS. So these are all security topics relating to how to make your Linux secure. It's like I'm going to say pick a secure distro. Okay, make it safe. It's like evaluate your security needs. So here's another one, your security needs. And we're going to talk about that. But back to dual booting. Can we just stick on dual booting for a bit? Yeah, and yes, Proton VPN does do that. So pros and cons of dual booting. I don't want to dwell on this. I'm actually going to just kind of summarize it. Don't dual boot unless you know what you're doing. Just don't. I've seen so many people destroy their systems. And by the way, the reason it's so dangerous is, why do people want to dual boot? 9 times out of 10, when somebody wants to dual boot, they want to keep Windows on there so they can play games or whatever, or their company requires Windows, and they want to add Linux on, but they don't want to give up on speed, so they want to run it on the hardware, and they want to be able to just boot the computer into Linux or boot the computer into Windows. That's what you get with the dual boot. The difference between dual booting and a virtual machine is that it's not running in a virtual machine, it's running a machine inside a machine that's software, which is slower, even if it does crazy things like pass through the graphics card calls and all that. But if you truly want Linux on hardware, on the raw iron, then dual booting is the way to do that. It's the only way to do it and keep Windows on that computer. And you can split the disk. You can have 2 hard drives. You can do technically having, we talked about WSL a lot 2 days ago, and we're not going to hit that topic again. So when you are dual booting, you are actually running 2 different computers. Now, you can split 1 hard drive, and that's super dangerous. Or you can have 2 hard drives and have 1 hard drive have Windows and one hard drive have Linux. In fact, that's if you're going to try a dual boot thing, I don't even really call that a dual boot. Technically, it's a dual boot, but usually when people talk about dual boot, they're talking about splitting their current hard drive in half. And that is way dangerous to do. It's much easier to do, and I have done it downstairs using things like Mint. Mint uses Gparted, this nice little installer tool for you to graphically drag how much disk you want to allocate to this new Linux that is going on your Windows system. Then it magically resizes the Windows partition without losing anything, and then it installs Mint into the new one. And then when you boot up, you can say, do you want Windows or do you want Mint by default? And it will go through and it'll pick Mint. In fact, until I experienced Linux Mint's installation process, which is hands down the slickest one I've ever done that involves dual booting, Populous doesn't even ask you for the option. It just says, no, you don't want to do this. It is the slickest dual booting interface I've ever seen. That was the only time I actually reconsidered recommending it to beginners, because they can do it. But here's the problem. 9 times out of 10, when people want to dual boot, they want to keep the Windows machine intact. And the risk of you screwing up your Windows system by doing a dual boot is very high. It's uncomfortably high. And so I've seen over the last 20 years, I've seen Windows decide that it wanted to take back the Linux partition and just do its thing and wipe it. I have seen the opposite. I've seen the Linux distribution think that it wanted to use the other partitions for some reason there. They never should do that. It's usually 9 times out of 10, it's also user error involved. Either way, you end up with a system where the Windows is trashed. And so the reason you went into the dual boot in the first place was to keep your, if you screwed up, you're buying a new license to repair your Windows machine. That's not 100% true today. Today, I have found that the newer machines will detect the Windows license on the chip. And so you can download it and install Windows without having to do anything. And I've done it many, many times. I've reinstalled Windows from scratch on systems that have been totally blown away with something else. And it actually picks up the activation and everything. It's pretty cool. So most modern computers that have Windows on them have the Windows licensing on the chips, so that when you install Windows, it does the right thing. It's a different topic entirely. So dual booting, bad if you really don't know what you're doing and you have any desire at all to not put your Windows system at risk. It's much better for you to live boot. We haven't even talked about live booting. I need to put that on here. Live booting. So live booting is when you stick a USB stick in, and let's see, can be made persistent. Live booting means boot off a USB stick. In fact, all of these methods of installing the software that we've talked about so far involve live booting. Live booting just means you are booting off of a USB stick and you're running the entire operating system as if the USB stick were the computer's hard drive. That's it. And when you turn your computer off and pull your USB stick out, everything goes back. It means it's, in that sense, it's very much like the containers we were doing yesterday. It goes back. You know, there's nothing that's saved. Now, you can make a USB stick, and people do this with Kali all the time. Kali Linux, a security distro. They will make their USB stick persistent, which means that you can now boot from your live boot USB stick, run Kali Linux, save stuff, and then turn the computer off and reboot it back into Windows. And so you only run off of a thumb drive. If you watch Mr. Robot, he does it all the time. He switches between Mint. He actually runs Linux Mint Cinnamon, which he probably wouldn't really do. And then he boots off of Kali Linux, which is obviously product placement, but because a lot of guys his level would not be using Kali Linux. That's for damn sure. So, but that's one of the ways you can do that. The other advantages of that is that you can run your Kali Linux off any machine that has not locked down secure boot, which is pretty much 80% of all computers you'll ever encounter in the world, which is pretty cool. So let's say you have you want to be like Mr. Coder spy dude. You can like take your little chip and your little persistent Kali Linux or whatever you build, make it a thumb drive, a live boot thumb drive, put it on your keychain or put it in your sunglasses. And He's had a secret partition the whole time. Yeah, this is true. He does. Yep. And then you go boot from any computer. So you're at your neighbor's, right? You turn your computer off, you turn it on, go into the system BIOS, change it to boot off USB, have it boot off of your super secret USB drive, run your Kali Linux operations from there, and then reboot the system back into Windows so nobody ever knows you were there. And that is what live booting is about. So live booting is actually it's something. It's like usually more fun for SecOps. So it's actually kind of a fun thing to learn how to do. You'd be surprised how many computers you can stick a Kali Linux live boot into and just boot the computer. And this actually leads us into Tails. Yep, Tails is one of these operating systems that also runs on a USB stick. This is I don't know if it belongs here. Rubber duckies. Okay, so rubber ducks. Okay, so there's actually a thing. It's a security thing called Rubber Duck, and what that is it's a USB operating system that live boots that also runs something. So you don't actually interact with the thing. But when you put one of these things in and you reboot a computer, if it's a Windows computer, it will own it. I mean, it will take everything off the system and put it on the Rubber Duck USB stick, and then you just turn the computer off and take it away, and you go own that system anytime you ever want to use it. So if you ever heard the term rubber ducks in the industry, that's what those are about. And those are super fun too. I don't have one at the moment. I've been wanting to make one just because they're so much fun to play with. Super dangerous though. So just know that what you're getting into if you want to play around with that kind of stuff. But it falls into the live booting conversation, which is why I feel like it's appropriate to bring it up. They are live booting. In other words, you can make a USB stick into the booted drive of the computer as if it were the internal hard drive. Doesn't know the difference. In the old days, there's another distro called Knoppix, which it turns out was the ancestor of Kali Linux. Did you know that Knoppix is the ancestor of Kali Linux, according to that chart? Did not know that. So Knoppix, not any of the other distros. Yep. So Knoppix, so actually Kali Linux came from Backtrack, which came from another tiny one, and then that came from Knoppix. So Knoppix was, as far as I know, the first Unix operating system to boot from a CD, and it was really used for a long time. In fact, yeah, everybody who knows it, it was the one distro that could save everything. You would put Knoppix in, and so somebody's had their whole computer wouldn't even boot with Windows, and you could boot the computer from Knoppix on a CD and save the day. I cannot tell you how many times I saved the day by starting up Knoppix and having access to the file system, because there was no such thing as file system encryption back then. There was no secure boot, none of that. So anything you could boot from that access to the hard drives could give you all the data off of all the hard drives. I just cannot imagine the heyday people must have had security wise back then. In fact, back then, sticking Knoppix into a computer meant that you could seriously own that computer, not just repair it. So it's no surprise to me to find out last week that Kali Linux is actually a descendant of Knoppix, that's kind of some fun little trivia. That's where boot repair, yes, boot repair application came from that. And yeah, Knoppix is still out there, it's doing its thing. And it did come from Backtrack. So this is all, I mean, this is largely a security-based course. I'm not saying it's only for security, but a lot of the stuff we're learning in the Linux, in installing Linux is relevant to security and, you know, operations and all that kind of thing. So, and since we're now moving into the security conversation, we can talk about that. We have a good half hour to talk about the things you need to do to make your hardware safe. And let me start by saying, why do you care? And that's evaluating your security needs is a better way to say that. And I said before the end of the break, that you can actually be fired for doing this wrong. And I just want everybody to understand this. Depending on the company you're working for, if you install Linux on a computer that's owned by the company, you better be damn sure that you're following corporate policy, starting with the permission to even install your operating system. Okay, most big companies like IBM that I worked, and banks and insurance companies, and even software development firms like when we have some guys interning right now, they have their own distros and they have a lot of proprietary IP they need to protect. In fact, the number one, this came from an IBM security conference that I was in. The number one source of IP espionage, corporate espionage, is compromised laptops. It is hands down the number. It's not hacking. It's not breaking in. The number one loss of corporate IP is from the stolen laptop. And so the reason that you will get fired on the spot for having your laptop stolen from you, if you cannot prove that you followed corporate policies, and even then you're a good chance of getting fired for that, is because you haven't followed the corporate policy, starting with the permission to install another operating system. At IBM, that you didn't have to ask for it. There was an official Linux that you could use, but they had policies in place that said, thou shalt set a secure boot password, which I think is stupid, but they made you do it anyway. That means you have to go into your BIOS like we talked and go to the settings and turn on secure boot. If you did not do that, your system, the other bad thing about setting that up is that unless your hardware manufacturer has a backdoor, which Dell did, you can't get to the system unless you know that password. You forget that password and your motherboard is bricked. The only hope you have is calling in to the BIOS manufacturer and saying, I want the password, and they say, well, there's actually this backdoor, but these days, they don't even have those anymore because they've been beaten to death over having those backdoors. So these days, if you want access, so that's why I think having a boot password, or whatever they call it, like a BIOS password, I think it's a bad idea. In fact, I'm going to encourage you not to do it, because the risk of you screwing up your computer and forgetting that password and never being able to use that motherboard again is really too high. Or just sell it on eBay if it breaks, right? There's actually a much more successful way to save your system from that. I remember BIOS password reset jumpers on the motherboard. I think they're rare now. That's a good point. I don't know if that's a thing. That's a good point though. So what he's talking about is these little jumper clips on the motherboard. You can go in there and actually take your computer apart and then reset the password by changing the jumper on it and probably giving it power. If that's a thing, I've never known about it. I've never seen that. That's interesting. So there you go. That is a thing. So I'm going to recommend against doing that, but that was a policy that IBM had. Another one is, they would have they used to have a password on just to be able to do anything in the BIOS, like setting up a master. I don't suggest doing that. I don't know. Here's the thing, guys. The only thing you absolutely must do if you care about the data on your hard drives is encrypt the hard drives. And somebody was asking about the backdoor still exists. It's called Intel Management Engine. Are you kidding me? So you can't. Okay, so there you go. So this whole protecting your login to BIOS and all this crap, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's not even secure. But what is secure is encrypting your hard drives. That is Loctite security. There's things you can do like with the cache and stuff, but for the most part, encrypting your hard drive is the single safest thing you can do. In fact, you can make a Raspberry Pi so that you can encrypt the hard drive, and if you log in with a password, it has something called a nuke password. So let's say you're being a spy and you put a Raspberry Pi that's running a fully encrypted SD card, and you stuck it in the bathroom someplace, and you can get to it through Wi-Fi from some other remote location, and somebody breaks into that laptop, to that Raspberry Pi, and you're afraid something's going to go bad. So you can actually log into it and enter what's called a nuke password, and when you do it, it actually chops the partition, the head of the partition off, so that there's nothing on the SD card, the hard drive, except for a bunch of random encryption. And so this is your best defense if you are doing it. Going to melt down when he reads about the IME. I really don't want to, actually. I really don't want to read about that. They're not logging well drunk then. Yes. Knopic Standard is a security distro. Okay. Yeah, Burnbox. Set the nuke password to the default password. Yeah, firmware security theater. Yeah, it is kind of, yeah, you guys probably know a lot more than I do. But to the beginners out there, just know this. If you want to protect your servers, first of all, know what you're getting into, make sure you have permission to even put an operating system on there, know what the requirements of your company are, and do those things, even if you think they're stupid. But no matter what, encrypt your hard drive. Okay, don't just encrypt your home directory if they ask you. Encrypt your hard drive. And people ask, well, is it going to be all slower? No, modern disk encryption is so fast because there's a buffer that sits between what gets written to the disk and what doesn't, and that buffer is actually the weak spot in disk encryption. But that buffer is usually able to handle it without any problem. You won't see any degradation in performance. There was a time, I remember when disk encryption first came out, that I noticed a difference. It seemed a little bit more sluggish to me, but I could have been just, crazy. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't have any real benchmarks to test it. But these days, you can have a fully encrypted disk and you will almost never know that it's encrypted unless you have some like really serious disk IO going on. For example, if you're putting like a database, right? If you're putting a database that needs low-level disk write access using, seek calls at the system level, then yeah, that should probably not be encrypted. So what do you think Windows would encrypt the disk by default? I don't know if Windows does or not. I think it's something that you still have to, I know Mac does. Apple encrypts disk by default. Does that go for HDDs as well as SSD performance? Do not know. I haven't been able to check the performance between an HDD and an SSD. Do you know about, let's see, the boot of USB topic? Yeah, we covered that. I got a desktop encryption was slower. Same pop was hardware matters. So interesting. Let's see, home folders is encrypted on Windows. That's about it. Okay, good to know. Apple is encrypted by default. I just mentioned that with the T-chip, yeah, on board. So they have like really fast encryption. Windows is not encrypted by disk by default. I can just browse my Windows file system from my Linux install. That's true? Did not know. Well, somebody was just saying that maybe home directories are encrypted by default. So that's something to look into. But basically, just know what you're getting into, especially when you put Linux on something. So the thing I really like about Pop! OS, I'm going to come back to this. Maybe Zorm has it too. But Pop! OS automatically says, do you want to encrypt your disk? And you just click on the thing and it does it. And Mint OS and disk encryption is a little bit harder. You do have to click on the boxes in the right way and provide your passwords. And then I have a friend, Machani M, he's on here, he's probably not here today, but he would actually go in and set up a separate partition and run Lux encryption and set his own partition ups to be encrypted, which is really cool and really crazy complicated if you're a beginner. So I really don't suggest you do disk encryption, disk partition encryption as a beginner. You just check the box that says, yes, I want my disk encrypted on Pop! OS or whatever. And Manjaro, I can do it with Vin 10 and Manjaro can see everything. Okay, well, there you go. You might want to look in the home directory, though, and see if that's been checked and how old the Windows is. I imagine they're probably going to fix that in the new Windows because disk encryption is really becoming the standard. Everybody's talking about it because it's really the one true way to save you because the data itself is encrypted as opposed to all of the access points into the computer. And by the way, disk encryption is also a little bit safer. So in my system, my disk encryption allows you to have 7 slots. And those slots allow you to change your password or to recover your password 7 times. And that's it. So, you can change your disk encryption, I think up to 7 times, and then you have to go do the thing again. But I don't know the full low level of that whole thing. I just know that you can change your password on your disk if you want to do so. And then that's taken care for you at the system level. So beginners, TLDR, just click encrypt disk if you're in any question about whether you want that data to be safe or not. And if not, if you're doing a VM, I would never encrypt it in a VM. Why do I care, right? The VM, I don't need that extra overhead, that extra hassle. So if I'm building a system in a VM, I would turn encryption off, which you saw me do yesterday with Pop! OS when I was installing it. And that Windows 10 login isn't even protected. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Windows, yeah. Okay, so next we have, let's say update and upgrade it immediately. Make sure you pick a secure distro. We talked about that, right? So if you do require disk encryption, make sure you pick a distro that has it built in that's nice and easy to use, like Pop! OS keep coming to mind, or Mint. These are the two that I know that do it really easily. Almost all of them do, but some of them are harder to set up. this is a big one that I want everybody to take note of. The first thing, and I talked about it yesterday right before I went off the air because my system like killed my stream, and it took me 30 minutes to get my machine to reboot. But so update and upgrade immediately. So most of the time when you download a USB to install, that image that goes on the USB stick is old. It's probably a good month or 2 or 3 old. And so it's not up to date. It doesn't have all the current security patches. It doesn't have potentially even support for your devices. Sometimes it can be pretty dang old, including like Minda's really old. And Tails has encryption by default. That's a good distro. So my point here is the first thing you should do as soon as you get your system to boot is to go to the terminal and run, if you're in Debian, run sudo apt update and then run sudo apt upgrade. Those are the first 2 things you can do. You don't need to set up your firewall necessarily. They're suggesting setting up your firewall. Not necessarily. You don't need to do that right away. But I would suggest you go in there and just upgrade is another option. Sudo apt upgrade, sudo apt update, and sudo apt upgrade is the number 1 command. Yes. And that's what I'm suggesting you do. That's your very first command on the system. If you do that, you will get the latest as of that moment. And actually, hackers are kind of waiting for you to not do that. Because if you put that system on the internet somehow or in some coffee shop Wi-Fi and you haven't upgraded it, they know what the vulnerabilities are and they're going to hit you right away with them. They're not even going to do anything. They're just going to use scripts to hack your system. It's not even that hard. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that system is upgraded. And you also want to commit to upgrading your system pretty regularly, depending on how accessible your system is to the internet. If your system is safely tucked behind, your Wi-Fi, or even better, it's hardwired in, which we're going to talk about, you're relatively safe from the outside world. You're not totally safe, but you're relatively safe. So you might not need to run sudo apt upgrade every day, but you need to just be aware that that's there. And particularly if you're building a cloud system, if you're making a cloud system like on DigitalOcean yesterday, you should run. This is why Ubuntu by default spams how many upgrades you are behind every time you log in, because every single one of those times you get farther behind, your system is now vulnerable, and these vulnerabilities are coming out every day. So just know that if you sign off on having a computer facing the internet, you should be running those upgrades and updates as often as possible. In fact, I made a good part of my money at IBM writing software to audit servers to see how up to date and how compliant they were. We had like 52,000 machines, and I had to write software to gather information about all of them and to find out which ones were vulnerable and unpatched. Why? Because if an unpatched system, people have hacked federal systems that were 11 or 15 years old just because they haven't been upgraded. So the reason that we talked about yesterday, we talked about whether you want to use a cloud server or not, or whether you just want to put your website someplace else that doesn't require you to manage a web server. This is why hashtag serverless is a thing, because then you don't have the hassle of updating it. But if you agree to put a server on the internet, you implicitly are agreeing to keeping that thing up to date. And if you don't, you will be owned. It's just a matter of time. So make sure you do this. Particularly if you're trying to go with cloud stuff. So you might as well get the practice right now and practice doing it on your distro that you're just building for fun. And that includes just even in a VM. You can practice it while you're not doing it. But if you've got a laptop in particular, if you have a laptop and you're taking that laptop and you're logging in at Starbucks or whatever, and nobody does that anymore with COVID, but if you did, you want to make sure that that computer is constantly updated. And you don't want to fall behind on that. Okay, so consider how and where your computer will be used. That goes with that. Consider disk encryption. We talked about that at length. Get a Wi-Fi dongle. This is a little tip that I really like. In fact, if you want, where is my... If you want to, you can get... I think I have one here. Hey. Oh, hey, thank you. Wow, what perfect timing. Where is it? All right, here's one. It's still in the box, but... There's one that's still in the box. I have one here that's still in the box. I'm not shilling this thing, I swear to God. This is the one that's still in the box. So this is, hey, we're going to do an unboxing. Yeah, I'm like the least elegant unboxer you've ever seen. All right, give me that thing. All right, so here we go. This is what you want right here. All right, and the reason you want it, so the reason you want this is it's always good for you. So the reason you want this is because why? Lots of reasons, not the least of which is how fun it is. We'll get into that later. Now, this one, unfortunately, is only 2.5 gigahertz instead of 5. I think the newer ones have 5 gigahertz. So this is a Wi-Fi dongle, and that's actually its official name. It's actually called a dongle. Yeah. And I'm going to say this is one of the funniest technical terms that you can actually say that has massive, like... This is one of the only dongles that can be put into promiscuous mode. Yeah, I just said that. So put your dongle into promiscuous mode. That's an actual technical saying. It's accurate. What this does, and not just promiscuous mode, but it also has, I want to say, monitor mode. And you'll actually see people, in fact, Mr. Robot, they rip one of these apart and put it into a Pringles can, and they make a targeted Wi-Fi. It's not a pineapple, actually. This is just a regular old Wi-Fi dongle. The reason you want one of these is not just because it's fun to hack with. A Cantenna, yeah. But I don't think I knew that name. But the reason you want this one is two reasons. When you are doing... This is just to give you Wi-Fi access. That's it. And you guys are probably familiar with the little ones that you like plug in, right? You know what I'm talking about? Where's one? Another one. I think I have one here somewhere. I think I'm like playing stuff from my lab. I know. One of these days you'll get to see my crazy lab. See all my weird stuff. I'm trying to find it. Where is it? Well, I'll find it. Wait. Where is it? Where is the dongle? Where's the dongle? All right. No, not there. Okay. Fine. So the Canna kit for the Raspberry Pi used to come. This is the alpha, yeah. This is the alpha dongle. And there's a black one. There's there's one that has a big. Oh, this one. Yeah, this is like the special one that has a big fancy antenna. I don't think you need this big fancy antenna, by the way. See this antenna right here? So I don't think you need this. I'm not shilling. Will you stop? Dude, I wish I could get money from shilling stuff, because I do all the time. I mean, I'm constantly putting stuff out there. This is... Somebody else told me about this, actually. It was a security guy who told me about this. So look at that. Look at that, man. Beep, boo. Beep, boo. Beep, boo. Beep, boo. It's like Danger, Will Robinson. It's like one of those antennas. Isn't that cool? I love that thing, man. So... our next rant. It's like... I need one of any recommendations. This is the last one I've had recommended to me is the alpha. So let me just tell you why I think this is worth having in your toolkit, and how it relates to this Linux conversation we're having. What does this, all this hacking and Wi-Fi talk have to do with Linux? Well, you're obviously going to use Linux to hack later, but for right now, it's nice to have a Wi-Fi dongle that will work if your hardware doesn't. And I can't tell you how many times this has happened. So I've had at least 4 times here where someone has brought in an old HP that they were trying to reimage, and they put Mint on it and lost their Wi-Fi. Because why? Because Broadcom. Broadcom is like the devil of hardware manufacturers in the Linux world. They are like the worst hardware manufacturer of all time when it comes to supporting Linux, and they don't even care. They're like, seriously, they're like the devil. Yeah, that's a good one. And so you install if it happens to you, so you install this you install your Linux, and all of a sudden you totally lose your Wi-Fi. Okay, so you only have 2 options there, and I'm going to tell you about both of those. Okay, the first option is to have a Wi-Fi dongle. And now you can have an $80 one like the Alpha that you can also use for hacking Wi-Fi, and all sorts of other educational things, by the way, not just hacking. This dongle is really good because it allows modes that are normally disabled Yeah. So Broadcom is the one he was flipping off. So the thing that's great about a dongle like this is that it actually allows modes that are normally disabled because they're insecure, such as monitor mode and promiscuous mode. So most software that runs on your Wi-Fi does not support that stuff because it's not needed. Why would you need to monitor packets that are going to other computers on the Wi-Fi? There's no real justification for that unless you're trying to study internet traffic. And so I'm told I still don't believe it, but I'm told by people who teach networking that when you have a Wi-Fi dongle in monitor mode, it's as if you had a packet sniffer on every single line between the computer and that router. And that is awesome and terrifying at the same time, because that means you can watch every single packet that travels on that network. And so that is really awesome. And in the old days when we did this, yes, I'm not kidding. So in the old days when you used to do this, you had to have an Ethernet cable connected to the other Ethernet cable, and you had to make a Wireshark. Basically, you had to make a packet sniffer that was on the wire so that it could watch all the packets. But Wi-Fi with monitor mode enabled allows you to do that to everything on every Wi-Fi, whether or not it's your Wi-Fi. That includes packets from somebody else's Wi-Fi. You can see all the Wi-Fi packet traffic, and you can use AirCrack, and you can break Wi-Fi like that. In fact, anybody who is trusting their Wi-Fi for their protection is gonna get screwed one day. There's people who have made these targeted, what do they call them again? The targeted ones. There's videos of people who have one that are like shooting. How do you be safe from a packet sniffer? You need to use encrypted protocols. So don't use anything but HTTPS, for example. Don't use anything except for SSH. Don't use Telnet and things like that. So you have to encrypt the protocols to be safe from packet sniffers. Okay, so I know I'm having way too much fun with this, but the reason I wanted to mention the Wi-Fi stuff is because if you're going to invest in getting a different one so that when your computer boots, you put Pop! OS or Mint on there and all of a sudden you boot, you don't have internet, well, now you have something you can plug in. And what will happen is really cool, actually. You'll plug in this Wi-Fi dongle, it will activate an event, and all of a sudden you've got Wi-Fi. So then you run your update and upgrade, and boom, now it has the Broadcom drivers that it couldn't get before. Okay, the only alternative to that is for you to have a connection through Ethernet to your router. And if you want to, make your own lab here, can I suggest getting, and this goes into the next thing, can I suggest getting a long cable and connecting it directly to your router, and then have that Ethernet cable available from your lab machine. So, because sometimes you're going to want straight up Ethernet speed, which doesn't have to do any, 2.4 or whatever, 5 gigahertz negotiation. It's like raw speed, and there is nothing faster than an Ethernet wire connected to your system, straight up to your router. So if you have a system that because Wi-Fi is very complicated, we won't get into it, but it's not unfair to say that that Wi-Fi is basically limited to the slowest thing on your computer network, and so that kind of brings the speed for everybody down. And depending on how far away you are, including whether it's raining or not. Did you know rain actually inhibits Wi-Fi performance? This is fact. You can go research this. Really interesting stuff. So if you want the absolute fastest possible internet experience, go with a direct Ethernet cable and make sure you have a computer that will do it. It doesn't have anything that's kind of going in between there. You'll really love it. In fact, microwaves are fun for Wi-Fi too. Oh yeah, they mess them up. So if you want performance, cell towers, all that thing, not to mention just more secure, there is no more secure network than a wired network. And this is why you will never see, like hacker crews connecting over Wi-Fi anywhere. If they're seriously doing something, unless they're owning people on Wi-Fi, their own systems are connected through Ethernet, because their Ethernet is not going to be compromised by anybody out in a parking lot or targeting them with a PVC pipe that's like 6 feet long that can target their Wi-Fi from a mile away, which is pretty damn cool. You can do it with a Pringles can, and one of these you like rip the guts out of it. I haven't made one yet, but you can actually make one of those, and you can target it, and you can get somebody's Wi-Fi from a good half-mile away, and so you can actually target different Wi-Fi. It's super cool, and if you like that kind of thing, in fact, there was somebody on the stream. Is Clandestine here? Clandestine actually streams, and he was telling me about a drone that they have. He says he's done it. He has it. Yeah. Add that to the drone. Yeah. They have drones that will broadcast the Wi-Fi. They stick a drone in hover mode over an entire network, and they can own people from 5 to 10 miles away. It's just so stinking cool. I mean, it's also terrifying. So if you care about that stuff, your absolute best bet is to get an Ethernet connection, because that can't be owned by any kind of Wi-Fi ownage. But also to just be aware of your encryption and do the basic things. You still have 2 neighbors with web Wi-Fi. I know, and you know what? And I'm not proud of my current network setup at all right now. I did not even anticipate hardening my whole home network before I did all of this. But this has really been fun to do, because it's you can sell credit cards with those antennas too. That's why I recommend everyone needs to go to the pay on the go NFC chips. Yes. I mean, there's like so much stuff. No, I know. I've been saying that all along. Just so everybody knows, if anybody does try to hack me, and there's many ways you could. You can hack anyone if you spend enough time at it. I don't care if I were to ever get hacked, I would just stop streaming completely, and I'll find you, and I have friends, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, so please just be good, know what you're doing, and the reason I talked about this in general is because alpha. And because you have the alpha dongle, it helps you use your computer when the Wi-Fi from Broadcom doesn't want to work, and that's why you would do it. Okay, so the last few things, 2 minutes before we have to close up. So you want to check for open listeners, and you don't know what that means yet, but what that means is basically running Nmap on your own computer. So you can do Nmap against localhost and see all the things that are running here. So you can see I have an SSH port, I have a web port running, that's because I'm previewing, and I have a PPP open. It's not PPP though, that's my previewer running. So you want to basically check your own system out. You can also install UFW, which is a firewall, if you want to feel more secure. I don't know that it still exists, but back the last time I was really interested in hardening, there was a hardening tool script called Bastille. Do you guys remember this? And what it would do is it would run through a whole bunch of checks to make sure that there wasn't anything extra that was just hanging out listening for connections, and it would do a bunch of hardening checks on your system. And I haven't since found an equivalent tool that's just like a one-stop shopping for hardening your system. It's Bastille was the name of it. I don't think it exists anymore. It's a Bastille tool for hardening. In fact, if you guys know of one, NF Tables, I haven't heard of that one. For hardening security on Linux. So this whole process of making your system secure is called hardening. Hardening your system with Bastille Linux. Watch how old this is. This is going to be like super old. Watch it. Yep, 2007. Oh, that's not bad. Okay, so apparently it's still around. 83. Have you ever looked up your SSH connection log before? Well, is that 100? Yeah. We do that all the time as an object lesson. The number of people attempting to connect on your SSH. Yep. It's called Bast. It's now called Bast LWE. Really? Oh, wait, that's your name. I see. I just got it. It took me a while. So apparently in 2007 is the last time that Bastille was a thing. It may still be a tool out there. So here we go. System administrators need to secure their systems while avoiding locking them down for strictly that they become useless. Bastille is a software tool that eases the process of hardening. So maybe look into this. I haven't used this recently. I can't officially recommend it. But this is how I used to just be sure when I was starting out as a beginner, and I didn't have to know all the security stuff. I just would run it against my system. Another tool that I would use is a thing called Tripwire, which I haven't done, and this is now off into a security topic. But I just will mention it since we're kind of done now. Did you find one? Did you find? Is it? I don't know, guys. I don't. If you guys actually find out what the new one is called, please let me know. Also consider your backup strategies. The first backup strategy is to put all your code that you care about and your notes into the cloud someplace. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if you encrypt it, you're fine. You can use Perl scripts to do your backups. You can do whatever you want. You can have a different USB, but figure out what your backup strategy is. My backup strategy is to put everything in the cloud. And that means, encrypted, double encrypted sometimes, files that are in the cloud, that are on services in the cloud, that I know I can get to, some of which some of which you might not know. But, I have my own backup strategy. So just figure out what your own backup strategy is. But you should never do anything. This is probably the biggest thing of all. Make sure that you look at your computer as a temporary device that could be thrown away at any second, because you will destroy your computer at some point. It's just a matter of time. And when you do, you need to get right back up. In fact, I was using DD to make a script to automatically make ISO USB thumb drives. And I accidentally one Sunday morning ran it against my hard drive and toasted the whole hard drive like in 20 seconds. And I was eating my food and my breakfast. I'm like, oh, well. And so I rebooted and reinstalled my laptop. I was up in 20 minutes. And all I had to do was reinstall the whole operating system and pull down all my configuration files and just run my install scripts that would install my system as I wanted it. This is why my config is so hairy. But it's actually kind of fun to maintain that, because I was able to run and get my system up anytime, anywhere. And the other reason I like that is if I want to go, all I had to do was reinstall. And you can actually write a script that reinstalls all of your favorite apps. Again, here's a reason to take notes. If you're taking notes, you can turn those notes into a script later and say, look, I want Inkscape on there. I want OBS on there. I want blah, blah, blah. And you see I have a whole directory full of install scripts, and I can just run those install scripts and bring my machine right back up to where I want it to be. It's not a custom distro, but it takes me to where I want to be. And then I can build different config scripts depending on, this one is for Arch, this one is for, my live streamer, and that kind of thing. So think about the strategies for backup, but leverage the cloud as much as possible and leverage automation. If there's one thing that's just so fun to do, it's leveraging. Somebody was making fun of me. It's like, let's see, he's either streaming or he's working on his dot files. I love working on my dot files. I love automating all the things and writing bash scripts to do different things. And since I discovered curl and GraphQL, it's even more fun, because it just feels so satisfying to automate, the creation of a computer anywhere, and to know that at any moment you can flip a switch and you kill your computer and you can have it up again in like 20-30 minutes. That is really powerful feeling, and I really encourage you guys to seek that out while you're having fun building your first Linux. I'm super excited for everybody. I'm about to close up here. I'm really, really excited for everybody, because you guys get to go through all these fantastic discoveries for yourself. Not to mention, the Wi-Fi thing, and the sky's the limit after this. Just installing your first Linux is extremely sathing, but then after you get that done, there's even more to do. You can make your first Wi-Fi pineapple. You can make your first, what do they call them? When you drop off, I forget what it's called. When you drop a Raspberry Pi in a building and own it. You can make all kinds of fun things, because there's just so much to learn and so much to screw around with. And as soon as you Geeks is nice. As you do more and more of these kind of things, you can make sure your Docker container, yes, with all the apps you want. In fact, I'm planning on doing that, Ninja. I'm going to make an Arch Docker container after yesterday. I've concluded that I'm going to make my Docker container is going to be my CTF Arch distro, and I'm actually going to publish it so that anybody else can use my CTF container if they want to do everything on that kind of stuff. In fact, you could even make containers that are designed to play certain CTFs. You could make a Docker container that has Linux build and customized to play just Hack the Box, or just Try Hack Me, or just Over the Wire, or something like that. So I'm super excited already by all the possibilities. And you can put Proton. You can add even that if you want to do your gaming. A Raspberry Pi is good for using different operating system. I think so. The problem is there's not as many options on a Raspberry Pi. If you do have a Raspberry Pi, though, make sure you play with RetroPie. Have you guys ever seen this? Holy cow. So here we go. We have RetroPie. We have RetroPie is one of the coolest things I have ever seen. This will play any of the original games since the dawn of time, including all of the Atari games. It's the actual game. They're games. These are like the actual ones. Yeah, and it is the real thing. RetroArch. I haven't played with that one yet. So go back to learning Linux. To get back to learning Linux, once you play with RetroPie, you'll be like stuck for a while. All right, so this is going to be it for me. I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to go ahead and later publish yesterday's video since it's been 24 hours, and I can now do that. I appreciate you guys, chiming in for the first time. Some of you have been here for a while. RWX Zeal, love the passion. Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call it for today. Yeah, spread the love. Go have some fun with it. And I'm just going to go ahead and end right there. So in the chat, if you guys want to tell me who to raid, go ahead. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream right now. I don't think... before I do that, does stopping the stream stop us from raiding properly? Does anybody know? Is that a problem? Yeah, I was going to say. So do we have somebody to raid? Who should we raid? Let's see. Yeah, I have to be live to raid. I mean, I think it actually follows through. Is an interesting raid. Steven, is Wolfram up right now? Is Wolfram up right now? Does anybody know? I don't mind Hikari Knight. Let's try Hikari Knight. I can try him. I don't know these people, so yeah, I've done that before name, but I actually have a way to do it that I've of my own devising. We're gonna do. Oh, Wolfram's on. That's a tough one, man. I kind of want to raid Wolfram. So we raid Wolfram. I mean, that's a big deal if he's actually on. No, he's not on. Your call. I mean, I like them both, but let's just try Wolfram. I mean, he probably will never raid us, but oh well. Let's just see what happens. I saw him raid someone though. Yeah, he never raids anybody. I mean, let's just try it and see what happens. 40 people. Oh, this ought to be interesting then. Let's give this a shot. And then I'll actually wait for it to go through. I'm gonna go, actually, let me just go pull it up real quick. Normally I don't do anything with Twitch. I don't look at Twitch. It's just usually not productive for me to look at Twitch. Wolfram only raids himself. You know, and okay, so we'll try. We'll raid him one time, and after that we'll see how it goes. Can you teach SFM by command line cats for video formats? I can, but not during the boost. I'm not gonna have time to do that kind of thing for a very long time. Live CEOing. No. Cancel. Not rating him. I mean, come on. This is a guy who can only talk about himself. Is that the only thing? You know what? I'm tired of people like that who've like made a name for themselves and are so smart that they can't talk about anybody else. Who's the other guy? The world needs less ego, people. And that includes from me too. Yeah. Hikari Knight it is. I've done sodding before, so I'm going to try Hikari Knight. Does have a large ego. I mean, I don't want to raid people who have large egos. I'd rather raid a gamer than somebody like Wolfram, actually, to tell you the truth. And I mean, I know he's a brilliant guy, but what is he doing for us? Is that... I love T-sodding too, but I've raided him so many times. So I know, but I'm going to try to raid somebody new. So we're going to try Hikari Knight. Please tell them hello for me. I'm going to click on the raid now button. And so here we go. I would love to try superhero as well for next time. So this is a gamer chat, obviously, but not opposed to that. Oh, they're playing Assassin's Creed. Oh, that's cool. I mean, I'm not opposed to Rob says hi. All right. I mean, yeah. Anyway, I raid everybody. I don't just raid, whatever. Take care if you're still on the stream somehow. I'm going to go ahead and shut it down. Did I raid the wrong person? You told me to raid Hikari Knight. You guys said to raid Hikari Knight. What OS are you using? Assassin's Creed. Oh, I mean, why not? Why not? It's just fun. All right. Why am I so red today? It's like my camera's broken or something. All right. Stop.